Oh, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Space 2020 online. Our program is going to start here in a few minutes. We got started last night. The Space Comics Market is up, and the link to that is running across your screen, and it's also in the comments if you just want to click over there. This whole thing will be recorded, so if you want to come back and watch it later, that would be fine. We started earlier than that. Matt Fizzell was doing a live sketch card party, and I attended, and all I got was this sketch card. So anyway, I have a few things I just need to get through with everybody, so I'm just going to read it. It's a lot easier to do it that way. So we're here at Space Small Press and Alternative Comics Expo 2020. And we wish we could be meeting in person. We decided to pull the plug on the physical show back in April due to the COVID-19 virus pandemic. We didn't believe it would be over this summer, and we were right. We didn't want to put anybody in danger. So hopefully you can take your mind off some of the issues facing us all for a little while, visit some old friends, get introduced to new ones. We tried to capture the same spirit that always prevailed at Space and in our new virtual state. So sit back, suspend disbelief, and enjoy. There are three main components to the show. The first, the live stream you're watching right now, where we will have a number of live panels along with some pre-recorded portions scheduled throughout the next 2 days. The schedule of panels is at the programming page, which we have a link for over in the comments if you want to get over there and take a look at what's coming up. Second is the Comic Space Market, which we just talked about. It's at the Comic Space Market, and again, the link's over there. In the market, we have 30 exhibitor tables set up. You can browse the tables and make comic purchases at each exhibitor's table. You'll also be greeted by many of the exhibitors in short videos. The comics market will be open throughout the next weekend, so that you can come back if you forgot something. And third, the Laughing Ogre will be open today. Oops. Oops, sorry. Laughing Ogre will be open today, and we have its Space market table over there with some of the local comics featured here, and that way you can avoid shipping fees. The physical portion of the Jamboard is over there right now, and you can go over, and if you're in town here, go over and add to it. It'll probably be there through a few, at least into next week. So please visit the Ogre. Please visit the Ogre, and not just for the comics market. They have an incredible selection of comics and comics-related products. The Ogre and their staff has always been great friends to Space and the local comics community, so please support them. There will also be a few side attractions. Longtime friends and small pressers Pam Bliss and Mike Carroll will be producing mini comics today, so check out the programming schedule for their links. And I can't really get started before I express my appreciation for the Tom was the director of the Cartoon Crossroads Columbus, and a comics journalist that we lost last November. He was a great friend to Columbus and the comics community as a whole. He seemed to like me for some reason. More than once, he either privately or in his column gave me encouragement at times when I really needed it. He has a lot of great friends over at CXC to continue on with that show, and remains an inspiration to me. We'll miss him in these challenging times, but he left his adopted town with a lot of friends who are determined to carry out his dreams. So, well, have fun at Space, explore all the great comics. Stay here for our first program, Comic Studies at Michigan State, hosted by Ryan Claytor, as soon as I shut up. Or go over to the comics market, and don't worry about missing anything. The entire stream will be recorded and available to watch later. So let's get moving. So I'd like to welcome Ryan and Laura, who are going to talk about the Michigan State Comics program. So I'll let you guys go. I'm here if you need anything. Just give me
Thank you, Bob. I'll try to start sharing the screen now. Let's see if I can make this happen. So many clicks. Yes, please. All right. How is that? Is that working out, Bob? I am going to assume yes.
You're good.
Unless anybody tells me otherwise.
Yes.
Okay. My goodness, this is starting in an odd place. So Let's see what we can do here. A little preview of what is about to come. So we are here to talk about the Michigan State University Comic Art program at Michigan State University. And my name is Ryan Clater. I'm a comics professor there. And I thought I'd give you a bit of an outline to start out with so you know what's coming here. First, I'd like to start talking about the MSU Comic Art and Graphic Novel Studio courses, which I teach. I'm also a practicing cartoonist, as well as the MSU Comic Art and Graphic Novel program, the minor course of study that we have. In addition to that, we also have a number of resources on campus, like the MSU Comic Art and Graphic Novel podcast, the MSU Comics Forum, the Special Collections Library, and we even have partnerships with local conventions here in Lansing, Michigan, that I'll talk about. And after I'm done, and I think this should take about 10 or 15 minutes, I'm going to turn it over to a fellow, a Michigan State University comics student who's gone through a number of my classes. Her name is Laura Root, and she's here with us. Laura, thanks for joining me.
Yeah,
And yeah, you got it. And so let's start out with talking about the courses. So this is a flyer for this coming academic year. And you see there's a couple different courses here, STA 201 and 301, which are the fundamentals and advanced graphic novel courses, respectively. So let's talk about STA or Studio Art 201, Fundamentals of Comic Art and Graphic Novels. And in this beginning class, we have a number of short story comics projects that are assigned throughout the semester. And by semester's end, each student compiles all of their work into their own individual books. And the culminating professional development activity that we have at the end of the semester is an in-store signing, where the students will sign and sell their work that they've made over the course of the semester. We also have an advanced comics course, and in that course, instead of several short story comics, the students are producing one longer length narrative, and instead of an in-store signing, they take it upon themselves to organize an in-store signing tour across the state of Michigan. Of course, this will be happening a little differently in the times of COVID, but for the past 10 years, this is what we've been doing. So as you can see, the intro course is offered a couple times a year in the fall and the spring, and the advanced course is offered once a year in the fall, which leads us into the Comic Art and Graphic Novel minor course of study. So this is an undergraduate minor that's housed in the art department, and it's actually an interdisciplinary minor between the art and English departments at Michigan State University. And if you'd like to find out more about it, you can go to this easy to remember URL. I've tried to shorten it for you here. So if you need to remember something, just remember tinyurl.com/MSU Comics Minor, and that'll take you to the same darn place, the Office of the Registrar, where it talks about the undergraduate minor in comic art and graphic novels. And you can see all the requirements, which I'm about to tell you about right here. So these are all the requirements, and essentially there are 15 credits required to complete the minor course of study, which equates to 5 classes. So these classes, all of them are required, and they involve English courses and comics literature, introductory drawing courses, and then those 2 comic studio courses that I mentioned to you just prior to this. Then the minor opens up a little bit, and the final class is one of these several classes that you see here. And at this point, the student can kind of tailor their minor to their interests. So you can select additional comics literature courses if you want to focus on the study of or writing about comics, or you can choose more studio courses if you want to focus on the making process. So those are the requirements of the MSU Comic Art and Graphic Novel minor. And I mentioned some resources that we have on campus for students who are studying here. We have the MSU Comic Art and Graphic Novel podcast, and this has been going on for 4 years now. We have 4 years of episodes, monthly episodes archived that you can go listen to for free. Anybody can do this. And the episodes have everything from regional comics announcements, like talking about events at Michigan State University and even surrounding areas that deal with comics. Michigan State University Special Collections highlights, which we'll start talking about the special collections in a couple minutes here. And finally, the core of each podcast is the in-depth cartoonist interview. So every episode we feature a different professional, practicing, award-winning cartoonist and talk about their life in comics, their process, etc. So if you're looking to find this, you can find the podcast at msucomics.libsyn.com. We're also available on any podcatching app. So if you have iTunes, Google Play, etc., we're on Stitcher, Intune, etc. You can find us in probably every podcast catcher. And if you find one where we're not featured, let me know. I'd like to get us in there. And before I stop talking about the podcast, I do want to mention briefly that we were nominated for a podcast award in the education category of the People's Choice Podcast Awards. So here we are among a bunch of other really great educational podcasts. Funny enough, none of them have to deal with comics except ours, but we were really happy to be in this group of folks here. Another tremendous resource we have on campus is the Michigan State University Comics Forum, which is a multi-day annual event for scholars, creators, and fans of the comics medium. And each year, the event is headlined by 2 keynote speakers. One keynote speaker is an award-winning creator. And this year, we invited Emile Ferris, who, if you're not familiar, she did this tremendous book called My Favorite Thing is Monsters, which has just swept all awards in the industry. So we were really happy to feature her in February 2020. And she also illustrated the event artwork here that features not only her, but also our second keynote speaker, Nick Susanis. So our second keynote speaker that we have is an award-winning comics scholar. So we have one creator and one scholar that we invite each year. And this is the standing room only keynote address from Nick Susanis. And he was talking about his work, including his book called Unflattening, which was published by Harvard University Press. And in addition to the keynote speakers, there's a number of different things that happen over the course of these multiple days, like an artist alley, which features dozens of creators behind the table of their own work. We also have academic panel discussions, which feature scholars coming from literally all over the world to talk about their research in comics. We also have exhibitions of comic art from the MSU Special Collections Library, reading discussions, film screenings, ancillary book signings. There's just a whole lot of stuff jammed into a very long weekend. And as of this date right now, we have been holding the MSU Comics Forum for 13 years. So 13 consecutive years of the forum. And 2021 will be our 14th year. In 2021, in February, we'll be featuring Kevin Huizinga and Deborah Whaley. And one thing I want to mention is that all events associated with the Comics Forum every single year are free and open to the public. And that doesn't just mean attendees. So yes, attendees can come to the artist alley, the panel discussions, the keynote speeches, all free of charge. But also, if you are an artist or a scholar, there is no fee to exhibit at the MSU Comics Forum. You might, as you may have suspected, there is a high demand to get in. So there's a submissions process. So if you go to the MSU Comics Forum webpage, which I'd like to mention here, here's what our website looks like. You can go to the forms section on the upper tabs there and find some submissions forms where if you're an artist or a scholar, you can apply to be part of our event. And I also want to talk about the MSU Special Collections Library. Now, this is the MSU Special Collections Library reading room, this glassed-in area right here, which is kind of unassuming. It's on the first floor of the MSU main library, and it's pretty much the first thing you see when you walk in. And it may not look like much, but behind the walls of this reading room sits the largest public collection of comic books in the world. I'm going to let that set in for just a moment. So at Michigan State University, we have the largest public collection of comic books anywhere in the world, and it's sitting in our main library right in the heart of campus. And one thing I wanted to mention is a person in particular. His name is Randy Scott, and Randy is this old Santa Claus looking guy you see here, and he is extremely knowledgeable and very humble, and he will tell you that he did not start this collection. And that is true on a technicality. He did not start the collection. The collection was originally started by professor named Russell Nye, who made a 7,000 comic book donation. But Randy has made it his life's work to amass the world's largest collection, bringing in more than 300,000 issues of comics, cataloged items of comics, I should say. There's even more than that. And this chart is out of date, so I need to update this. I think the latest count is around 350,000 or so cataloged items that you can search through and find. So I didn't want to blow past this feature of Michigan State University Comic Studies without mentioning the man behind this. So Randy has been working since the 1970s on this collection, and he is still working at the MSU library today. So this is another resource that's not only available to MSU Comic Studies students, but if you want to come and check it out on your own, you are able to come and read through these comics that are in our collection. You have to sit in the reading room. For obvious reasons, we cannot check out these books. If you're leafing through Wonder Woman #1 or Walt Disney Comics and Stories #1, we don't want it to accidentally go anywhere. So you do need to stay in the reading room, but it is open and publicly accessible. And finally, we have a partnership with a local comic convention here in Lansing called the Capital City Comic Con. And this happens each fall, kind of opposite the Michigan State University Comics Forum. So we've partnered with them to form the Capital City Comic Con Michigan State University Scholarship in Comic Studies. Now, this is only open to MSU Comics Studies students. So the applicant pool is very small. It's not open to everybody in the United States. It's not even open to everybody in the university. It's only open to MSU Comics Studies students. So this very narrow applicant pool gives you a lot better odds of achieving this scholarship, which the scholarship recipients' artwork is used to promote the event on a number of different things. This is the latest scholarship recipient's artwork, who happens to be with us today. So this is Laura Root's artwork for last year's Capital City Comic Con. And they feature this on their website and program books and posters, etc. They also give you a free table to exhibit and sell your work there. And if that wasn't enough, they also give you $1,000 cash in your pocket. So that is not a scholarship that's tied to tuition or books or room and board. That is $1,000 in your pocket as an MSU Comic Studies student, should you garner this scholarship. So this is Laura. Hi, Laura, with her event artwork from the scholarship. And that's what I wanted to tell you about. Before I turn this presentation over to Laura, though, I just wanted to pop up this image and mention my email address in case you have any questions, or in case you're watching this presentation at a later date. You can always contact me at my Michigan State University email address, rclater@msu.edu. And that's a little bit about what we have to offer at Michigan State University. And I think Laura might be telling you a little bit more.
Yeah, hi, hello, I'm a student. So hi, my name is Laura Root. I am a student and comics artist, and also graphic novel minor, incidentally, which is why I'm here. I initially was planning on abandoning comics entirely when I graduated high school, and then I failed because I took a drawing class that just so happened to be taught by Ryan Clater, and he gave us the little tour of the catacombs in the basement of the library that have every comic that exists. And he was like, "Did you know you can get college credit for drawing comics?" And I was like, "That is fantastic." So now I'm doing comics again, and let me tell you a little bit about that, actually. So I have finished 3 comics thus far. 2 of these having been completed during the course of 2 of the studio courses that Professor Clater mentioned. The first on the left, People Going Places, is the mini comic that I completed in the fundamentals course. So it's got 3 short stories, my very earliest work that finally used all the conventions that I learned in class rather than just me drawing it in a notebook with a pen. They're all focused on people getting from point A to point B, because odd fact, that's one of the most basic story conventions that doesn't involve an antagonist. And sometimes you just don't want to write about somebody punching somebody else. The other 2 comics that I'm focusing on are Hamlet is Okay, 1 and 2. I'm working on an ongoing series that's like a modern retelling of Shakespearean plays all smashed together in one cinematic universe, cinematic comics universe. I wish it was cinematic. So the story focuses on basically Hamlet as the play has it written, except he's really got to get his act together, and he meets people that teach him that killing people isn't a coping mechanism and there are better ways to deal with loss. It's a story I started when I was 15 after my own dad passed away, and I was like, oh, I really vibe with this play from the 1500s. And so I kept drawing it on printer paper, putting it in a 3-ring binder, and then my mom took the 3-ring binders and hid them because I wanted to destroy them. I drew it again in a little sketchbook during my freshman year at college, because I was like, maybe I'll just do this as a hobby. I don't know. I'll quit this someday. But then I had a drawing course with Clater, and I was like, hey, what if I redrafted it a 3rd time at some point? So I finally get into the advanced studio course, and lo and behold, I redraft it a 3rd time into a deluxe, beautiful book that I got to make myself and sell at those silly little signings at the end of the class, which was super cool for me because this was originally not something that I thought I would be doing ever again. So on the next slide, I've got more of my most recent work, the second Hamlet is Okay. I plan on making it 5 volumes long because there are 5 acts in a Shakespeare play, and I am very smart. So the work focuses on brotherhood, coming of age, coping, and meeting with others' expectations, because these are a lot of things that I've been going through since I was 15, really maturing into the artist I am now and figuring out where my work needs to focus. And meeting others' expectations is something that I've really struggled with over the course of the class and out of the class, making sure that, you know, the work that I'm producing by myself is really good enough for other people to look at, because again, I reference my 3-ring binders that I would love to burn on a pyre, but sometimes you just have to share your work with the world. And the courses especially, and the opportunities I've been given because of the graphic novel minor and the whole program at the school has really made it sort of a journey to accepting my art as something that I want to show other people and make more of, and I'm still working on right now. So right now I'm working on the 3rd volume of this, what is it? It's not a trilogy if it's 5. This 5-part series, the 3rd Hamlet, that I hope to finish before the end of the year, or at least have by the next comics forum, because one thing I've learned from the classes especially is setting schedules for myself and setting dates, because before the class I really aimlessly created without any kind of nod towards when I wanted things done or when I needed them done by. So the class really helps me figure out I need so many pages done per week. I need so many pages done per month, and I can track how fast I'm getting stuff done, and if I'm getting stuff done too fast, because if you do get things done too fast, you can definitely hurt your little wrists, which is something that happened to me. So figuring out exactly how much I can get done in what amount of time is something that I really took away from the class now that I'm a year out and working on like a 3rd book. It's something I always keep in the back of my mind, as well as getting opportunities like this, coming to different conventions, tabling at places like the Comics Forum. I meet people that I never thought I'd meet because there are so many connections that the program gets you to. So like the Capital City Comic Con, I got to meet a bunch of different artists who told me a bunch of different things. I got the creator of Happy Bunny to draw me a picture of Hamlet, which I'm very proud of. I got Emile Ferris to tell me that she thinks my work is pretty sexy because there are werewolves in it. And that's something that I don't think I'd ever experience otherwise. So that's kind of some really crazy life-changing stuff that's happened because I just happened to take a drawing class with this comic-obsessed man. So I'd like to thank Professor Clater for that. And I hope you all will take these things into consideration and never stop creating as long as you can, I guess. Thanks. Oh, also, I saw in chat, somebody asked if there's a link to the MSU database. There is. So the link is lib.msu.edu/spc/index. That's lib.msu.edu. I don't think the special collections is open right now due to the pandemic, but you can browse and see all kinds of things that are in there. So there's that.
Okay. Thank you, Laura. That was great. I don't know how this is working, if we have a chat or if we are done at this point. Hey, there's Bob.
Yeah, we do have the comments. I don't know if you can see them. I don't see any questions. Anybody's got any questions for Ryan? We got a little more time here. One thing you could tell us about the upcoming comics forum. I was just there this morning looking at your blog, and I see that it's well, I think you told me the other day in our practice round that it's going to go online already. That's in February.
That's right. So the Comics Forum typically happens one of the final weekends of February, which it is scheduled for 2021. And we have been in talks behind the scenes about moving the February 2021 Comics Forum online. So we will not be having an in-person event in 2021. I have not made that announcement publicly yet, but that will be forthcoming very soon. So
you got an exclusive here.
You're getting a space scoop.
All right. Well, I'm sorry to see that's happening, but because I always enjoy that. It's always been a lot of fun when I get up there. And we were discussing the high-powered coffee I had the night before earlier today.
We know how to make it up here.
Yeah, I need to get that formula so I can stay awake all day today. So are you working on anything right now, Ryan? I know you did the Coin-Op Carnival and won a space prize for that.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. So I am co-authoring a book, and I fully illustrate said book. It's called Coin-Op Carnival. It's about old electromechanical coin-operated amusement devices, which basically means old pinball and arcade games that were manufactured prior to 1978. So this is prior to the advent of printed circuit boards and television screens and stuff like that. Everything was operated, and all the memory inside is simply by switch logic. So we talked about
fun.
What was that?
Pinball was fun, and you could smack it around.
Well, I make no discrimination against any era of pinball. I love it all. But we do sort of hone our focus in this publication to electromechanical games, and we have everything in there from an interview with the most prolific pinball designer of all time. His name is Wayne Nyans. He's 101. He's going to be 102 at the end of this month, and he's still alive and living on his own today. So that comprises about the first half of the book, and the second half of the book are a number of different articles from game reviews. We have a pinball game review, an electromechanical arcade game review, an electromechanical text segment, a product spotlight, papercraft models, letters, columns, just a ton of stuff jammed into 64 pages. And the first issue released in 2019. And as Bob was kind enough to mention, it won the top Space Prize, the first place in the graphic novel category this year, which we're very thankful for. So thank you to all the
I have your plaque right over there on the floor that will be
nice.
mailed off shortly.
Dust it off and send it my way.
Sample of what our plaques look like. Ryan's is over there, but this is for the kids that we talked to actually for Thursday night, I guess it was. So
it looks very official. Thank you.
Just picked them up this week. So
cool.
I think there's a question for you then, Laura. Did you see that?
Oh, comment? Yeah. Somebody's asking if I know Hamlet adaptations. I actually have a whole group chat for people that draw Hamlet, which is something I made because I was like, that should exist. And I'm friends with a bunch of artists. One of them just finished her thesis a couple years ago on different comic adaptations of Hamlet. I don't think that one came up, actually. I'll have to ask her if it's in there. But I personally have the No Fear Shakespeare comic adaptation, and I think one other one. And I started making my own because I was like, there aren't enough jokes in this.
And before we talk about anything else, I also want to make sure everyone knows that, one, Laura has a table at the Small Press online, Small Press and Alternative Comics Expo online in aisle 1, where you can find her books. And she was even nominated in the same category that I was. I was sweating a little bit that my student was going to outdo me this year and get the prize because her book is that good. You should really go check it out. It's called Hamlet
Laura,
is Okay.
You know, he wins these because he has so many students and they all vote for him. So that's the.
Don't give away the secret, Bob. People will be far less impressed.
I think the exhibitor vote won you that. So you should thank them. Thank all your students for that.
By the way, I just realized that there are comments in here. I see JM. Right. Hey, JM. Right. Thanks for tuning in. Ken.
Let's sign up.
Steve. Hi, Ken.
JM found the college he hasn't attended yet.
Risa. Let's see. Joe Zabel. Thank you for tuning in, guys. Really appreciate this. You being in the audience.
You know who Risa is? It's Terry Wood.
Is that right?
Right. Wandering Star. Cool. Right. She's a Facebook friend for a while.
Very cool.
Well,
thank you for watching.
I bought her book back in the 80s. We traded some mini comics on it. She did make an appearance in O Comics a couple times.
Cool. So. Very cool.
So what's else going on? So Laura,
anybody
you
else
work?
Yeah.
Well,
go for it.
Anybody else got questions?
Yeah.
Laura, do you have any other projects underway?
I did a couple of really short mini comics. I get them out, but I'm in the middle of packing everything up to move. But I did a couple of short mini comics, little horror mini comics that aren't really horror because I'm not a very scary person. I ended up putting them out at my table at the Comics Forum last year, and I found something really interesting, which is that if you make a comic about Michigan, people in Michigan love it. I noticed that one sold out completely, and then the other one I made that was not in Michigan did not. And I don't know, because they're very close aesthetically. That was a fun little experiment I did. People in Michigan love comics about Michigan.
You have a pretty strong local comics scene, and things about Columbus seem to do pretty well. So I understand how that works. So yeah, we're trying to be a little more regional the last few years. Let's see what else.
Yeah, you guys have a great scene down there too with Space and CXC. It's really cool to see the community that you guys have built up down there. It's always a pleasure to head down there. I wish we could be there right now.
Well, you'll get to see some of it today. Jeff Smith will be on later about 2:00 to talk about
really?
Cartoon Crossroads Columbus.
Nice.
And so
have they talked about moving online yet? Or
they're going to be online. Yes.
Oh, good.
I think they made that announcement quite a while ago.
Okay.
So they're looking in to see what I'm up to today, and I've been kind of a beta tester.
We're doing the same. We're doing the same thing over here too. Well, I was talking to my Artist Alley coordinator today saying, hey, check out Space, check out Comic-Con International. There's a couple of online conventions coming up here, and we should see what they're doing.
I have a whole list of mistakes I can give you when we're done here today.
Yeah, you have to forward them my way so we don't make the same.
The last 2 months, I've just been playing with things and trying to figure out what works and what doesn't work.
So I see we have another question. Alan says, if you want to do comics research at the MSU Special Collections Library, who do you contact? Well, you don't have to contact anybody, but you can call the Special Collections Library if you want to, if you have any questions. I would suggest logging on to the library system, and it's free to create a profile there. And once you have a profile, you can surf through the catalog and find what you want from the comfort of your own home and input, I'm going to arrive Saturday at 2 p.m. or I'm going to arrive in a month. As long as you give about 24 hours advance notice or so, we should be able to get all the books ready for you. And then you show up at the reading room that I do a little earlier in the presentation, and the books should be ready for you. If you are going to be about 24 hours in advance, you'll probably want to give people a call just to give them a heads up, but 24 hours or more, and you're usually good to just show up and the books will be there. So really convenient. Randy used to brag about how he could have any of the 3,000 books on your table in under 60 seconds. And that changed when the Special Collections reading room moved upstairs. He wasn't able to get them quite that quickly, but I told him, look, Randy, now it's not 60 seconds, it's 0 seconds, because we can log online, bring up anything we want, and show up the next day, and it's already there. We don't even have to ask you. So yeah, you can log online, create a profile, very easy. Again, you don't have to be an MSU student or professor in order to do that, and numbers for the MSU Special Collections Library are there as well.
Prove that Laura's over there in the market. Here's their little welcome to our table. A lot of the exhibitors are going to have a little welcome video. So here's a
Hi there, Sporty. You looking to buy some comics? Well,
Nice.
You like my haircut?
Short and sweet. Very cool.
Got Ryan here too somewhere. Let me see if I can find him. Oops, sorry.
Oh no. Find the short one. I accidentally recorded a long one.
Uh-oh.
Anyway, while Bob is looking for that, Alan, thank you for your question. And if anybody else has any questions, you're welcome to chime in here, or you can also contact me. My email address is rclaytor, not Clayton, rclaytor @msu.edu. I'm happy to chat more later.
Ryan.
Did you find it? Hey,
Yep.
There we go. I can't hear any sound. Can you guys?
I can hear. Can you hear?
But there's a book and pinball machines.
He's saying you should check out his book.
Can you hear him, Laura?
No.
No.
Oh no, this is the long one. No, we have to sit here even longer looking at me.
We have some time.
He's saying this book won the Space Award. It's really good, and it's about pinball. I want to point out amusement devices. It's fully colored. That's amazing. I wonder who did the flat work for that. features interviews and things from famous pimp people.
Explaining how these games work.
And all those things I mentioned mere minutes ago. There's the papercraft models. Well, Bob, thank you so much for setting all this up. I am dreading finding out how much work this is in a few months when we start getting ready for the MSU Comics Forum.
I retired at the end of May, and I've been putting 8-hour days in since then, 7 days a week. So
I believe it. But, that's amazing.
Fun. If I didn't have that, I'd next week I'm not sure what I'm doing. I think sleep a lot next week.
Taking a week off. Well, are there any other questions in the audience? Anybody have any questions about the program of study at Michigan State University for comic art and graphic novels, or questions for my student Laura here, who produces really amazing work? I know I said it before, but go check out her table in the artist alley here. You will not regret picking up her Hamlet books. JM chiming in. Bob, next week we can start planning O Comics next issue.
Yes, I promised them. We're premiering the O Comics Chaos issue number 28, which we had no idea when we came up with the theme last year what we'd be into this year. So it just seemed appropriate. So there's copies of that over at the Ogre, and it'll be up on my table in aisle 1. If anybody's interested.
A very apropos theme for 2020.
So I'm afraid to come up with one for next year. What do you think? What do you think, JM?
The bliss issue, the relax issue,
Renaissance issue, something positive.
The sunny winter issue. Yeah, go for it, Laura.
Okay, I didn't want to interrupt. So Jam's asking what my influences are. I love Shakespeare. I have read every single play and all of the other plays that other authors wrote during the same time about Shakespeare's stuff because they hated him. I own over 50 copies of Hamlet. They're all in a box downstairs. And I'm hugely influenced by that. I really love French bande dessinée comics like Tintin. I'm a big fan of Asterix and things like that. I really like how they can make like characters that are so simple, but then put them in situations that can be goofy or serious or interesting. And I also was very big into anime when I was in high school. So that was a definite influence. I'm trying to not like follow as closely anymore, but yeah, French, manga, all the things.
Thanks for the question, JM. All right. Well, if there's no more questions, we've got 15 minutes before the next presentation. We should probably get out of your hair, Bob.
I could run some video here until the next panel shows up. The next panel will be the art and storytelling in comic strips with Matt Fizzell, Bruce Rosenberger, and Joe Morris. So they'll be coming up here shortly. So if you want to come in early, guys.
JM says, wait! Exclamation point.
Oh.
What are we waiting for, JM?
I can hear the keys clacking. How many more space awards does Ryan plan on stacking? Oh, Lord.
Anything this year?
Not. I was going to say, I have nothing to turn in for 2020. I'm working on Coin Op Carnival #2, but the first issue took us over 2 years to complete. So I've been saying since the start of, since the launch of issue 1, we're hoping for a 2021 release. We'll see how it goes. I'm not going to kill myself to make that deadline, especially with the year of touring that we did in 2019 and the year of O-Comics chaos, as Bob put it, in 2020 that we're having. But I am diligently working on it, and so is my partner in crime, Nick Baldridge. And both of us want to say a big thank you to the Space Prize Committee and also all of the space exhibitors who voted for our work. Sincerely, thank you. This means a ton to us.
Just want to let everybody know we are accepting books for this year for the 2020 award. So far, I only got about 4 packages, so there's pretty good chance you'll win. So I think originally I had them have to have it postmarked by this weekend, but I might move that out a little bit, give some people some leeway here. Yeah, I'm not sure. I do believe all this pandemic stuff slowed down a lot of creativity. That's a shame. But I would just suggest just keep going. That is my way of, trying to keep my head straight is by sitting down and drawing. I got a Fitbit the other day from my son for Father's Day, and I was drawing something the other night, and my heart rate went way down. I was kind of in a fugue state. So it's really, it works for me. I don't know about everybody else, but you just need to do something to keep your head on and moving forward. So all right, well, if there's no more questions, I can let you guys go, and I can run some videos here. We get to watch the rest of the exhibitors, and also I've got our online Jamboard. I got a little video about that, so we can do that. Do you guys want to hang on for a while and watch that, or
we'll probably step away and let the next presenters come in here. You can get them set up. But again, thank you for putting this together, Bob. We really appreciate it.
No problem. No, enjoy it. Wish we could be in person. It's a lot more fun.
Take care.
Like to meet people. So take it easy, guys. So since I've got some time, this is the little video I put together, the Jamboard going together. Oops, let me get. Of course, that's my sketch that I've been using for next drawing was by David Caldwell. The next one is by Charlie Haggard. And Carlos Rivera. And Columbus's own Michael R. Nino. And Chris Dillon. And another Chris Dillon. That's Craig Lindsley. And there's my Zen drawing. And another Columbus standard, Victor Dandridge. And then Joe Morris, who will be on our next panel. And the most Space Prize Award winner, Brent Bowman. And Stephen Hines. And Marianne Rose Papke. And Shandu Tanidi. And and lost track here. And it's Bob Ray Straker, and Jeremy Daniels, Molly Durst, and Kel Crum, who you'll be seeing a lot of in the Cartoon Carnival coming up later. And Tom Williams, who has pretty much been the face of our posters for many years. And me again, because I was afraid we wouldn't fill this up. And Pat Reading Scallion. And one of my cohorts, Ken Epstein. And since we have time, we can go through some of the exhibitor.
My name is David Holdwell. I'm a cartoonist from Tennessee. This one here, I got my comics. From Springwood. That's horror comics in 1966.
Bonnie, there's Morty. You looking to buy some comics? Hi, I'm Marianne Rose Hapke of Silver Kraken Comics. At my table this weekend, we have Ghost Parcel,
Run.
Hi, I'm Bob Kirby. I'm welcome to Space and Back Porch Comics table. This year, Back Porch Comics has two publications. Other time and space.
And I see Joe Morris is on. He's going to have the on the next panel. Hey, Joe, how you doing?
Hey-yo. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you good.
Cool.
Yeah, we just had to run some stuff. Our last panel ended a little early, so I have some video filler. A lot of the exhibitor videos that are showing up in at the tables. So I'm going to run through those a little bit on the live feed here, and we want to switch you over. So Bruce and Matt are going to show up here shortly. So, there's Bruce, and we want to switch you over. How you doing? So Bruce and Matt are going to show up here shortly.
I'm getting a weird echoey thing.
Do either of you guys have something on? Over.
Yeah, I think give me a second.
Bruce and Matt are going to show up here.
Did that help?
I think so.
Okay.
I don't hear an echo anymore.
Yeah, I think I was watching it.
If you're watching it on some other device, it's gonna do that, and then it keeps going. I found that out the hard way. We got to practice.
Oh, technology! I love it so.
This is all new technology to everybody.
How you doing, Bruce?
How you doing, Bruce? Can you hear us?
Bruce.
Oh, we can't hear him. Check your
volume up.
Check your volume, Bruce.
While Bruce is unfortunately muted, I would just like to say how awesome Bruce's little library is there behind him. There he is.
Oh, there you are. Okay.
Phew. Got a little worried there.
While Bruce is unfortunately muted, I would just like to say how awesome Bruce's little library is there behind him. There he is.
Okay. Right. Do you have something on there, Bruce, besides what the computer you're working with?
Just like to say how awesome Bruce's little library is there behind him. There he is. Bruce, if you're watching it on a different screen, you need to mute it because otherwise we get this weird echo deal.
Oh, sorry.
Yep. That'll do it.
That was it.
I made the same mistake. It's all good.
Everybody's got to do that once. So that's
there's gonna be.
So we're just waiting for Matt then. So so what do you guys? I know Joe has his Torque Press stuff up in the comics market, so that's you can stop by there and check out.
I spent a day trying to figure out how to do all that and actually pulled it off. So I'm very proud of myself that I got into the virtual comics market instead of forgetting. So
decided not to go virtual on us, but that's okay. I was looking forward to a new Dutchy Digest. Is there one in production?
It's been written.
Oh, okay.
And
can you get it done by the end of the weekend so you can get it into the space?
I started laying out page 1.
You got 2 days. You can do it.
Yeah, it'll be fine.
Well,
maybe I'll give you till next weekend. How's that? Will that work?
That might work.
I always look forward to that, Bruce.
Oh, thank you.
Me too.
That's just because you're from Pennsylvania, though.
Yes. And my daughter isn't that far from you.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, she's over in York.
Oh, okay.
Maybe I'll get there in August. I don't know. We'll see.
Oh.
And my sister is in Hamburg.
Oh, okay. And you were from the coal region, right?
Yeah, I'm north near Pottsville, St. Clair.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That's not far at all. Oh.
Yell at Matt.
Is there a way to show other drawings in place of me?
I know there's the
screen share.
Thing.
Yeah. I'm going to stop sharing mine. you can do a screen share if you've got it on your computer. You want something with a camera to shoot?
It's okay. I don't. I just had
there's
some
Matt.
samples of old comic strips and you know the
Okay.
transition for story from gags to storytelling and
Matt, you're okay. You've all been tested. You're good. So,
yeah, I'm okay.
so you guys going to do any screen shares? I have to let it in. You can, if you see the screen share button, then put up what you want.
Yeah,
And then I have to let it into the stream, but you can shut it off on your end. We found that out.
Okay. I got something I can do. It's not necessarily a thing, but I got something prepared, sorta, kinda.
You guys are ready. This is the art and storytelling in comic strips. I don't think I put the whole thing on there. So I'm gonna get off the screen, but I'll be here. If you need anything, just yell, and we'll get going here.
Okay.
Thanks,
Cool.
guys. See you shortly.
Thanks, Bob. All right.
Great.
As Bob said, this is our panel on. This is actually art and storytelling in newspaper style comic strips and shorter self-contained styles comic strips. Real quick, my name is Joseph Morris. For those of you that don't know me, I've been going to space. I haven't been going for the full length of it, but I'm pretty close. I think I missed like 2-3 years, maybe. I was there when it was still at a Holiday Inn, so use that as your metric. My company's called Torque Press, and for the last few years, I've been doing heavily newspaper style strips. So I know newspaper style strips, so I thought I'd do a panel about it. And with me is Bruce.
Hi.
Say hi.
Bruce
I'm
Rosenberg.
Matt Fidel. Ooh. And it's hot in here. And this is Bruce.
Yep.
I are here.
So I'm the
What you
author
do,
of
Bruce?
The Amazing Cynical Man.
Yay.
Started out as mini comics back in the 1980s. And I got a chance to do a weekly newspaper comic around the turn of the century, around 1999. And
Cool.
I kind of repurposed the mini comics pages sideways and made a weekly newspaper comic. And once you get enough pages, you get to put out a book. And I've been going to space since like I think the second year, back when it was at the Ohio Agricultural Hall of Fame.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
I didn't even know about that one.
it was at the fairgrounds.
Oh, cool. You remember the Aladdin Shrine Center? We were in
Yeah,
the
that was
Aladdin
fun,
Shrine
too.
Center for a while. That was nice.
No place to go for lunch around there.
And I'm the artist for Dutchy Digest.
All right.
Yay.
It's written by Stephen Hager, and well, it's pretty much all Stephen. I just do the drawings, but he lived the life. So just about a Pennsylvania Dutch farm boy who kind of is the local detective, solves all the local mysteries.
And it's all written in like Pennsylvania Dutch dialect.
Why, sure now. I'm a fake. I didn't move here till I was 14. I was born here, but lived like everywhere else. And when I was 14, I moved back here. And people around here know I'm not Pennsylvania, or I'm not from the area because I talk funny. Well, you talk funny now.
Nice. So let's see. So, one of the main differences, I think, between like a regular comic book and like a strip or a self-contained like page is with a regular comic, you know, you've got it's a difference in unit, because like a comic book is like, say, 24 pages, but the 24-page comic book, it could be part of like a 6-issue arc. So you're really looking at whatever 6 times 24 is. I can't do math, especially while staring at myself in a camera. So you've got lots and lots of pages to tell a story. Whereas with a comic strip, do I have any sitting around right now? Give me a second.
Like peanuts?
With a comic strip, you know, you got like space for, I'm upside down. You got like 4 panels to work with. So you have a much shorter unit to work with when you're working with comic strips than you do with the traditional comic. And the other thing about comics is, you know, the way you read left to right and up to down. But a lot of people nowadays there's not a lot of simple panel to panel storytelling anymore. It seems like there's a lot of really complex layouts where they'll try to like lead your eye and all sorts of crazy loop-de-loops all over the page. And you can't do that in a comic strip either. You're really just set in a panel type of thing. So I thought that would kind of be what we talk about, like trying to make the most of a small amount of space instead of having hundreds of pages and, you know, hundreds and hundreds of panels to work with. So.
Well, you know, it's interesting in the history of like comic strips and, you know, comic books too, obviously. But, you know, you go back to maybe the 1920s when all the comic strips were, they were just gag a day. There was a gag every day. And then slowly but surely you had some people start putting a little bit of continuity in from day to day. You know, there'd be, you know, an early example, I mean, obviously is Thimble Theater. And, you know, that started in late 1919. And E.C. Segar, actually, I think he was just picked to do it because they wanted something to go against Minute Movies, which was it was a continuity strip, I think, that told little stories. But for whatever reason, they wanted something like that. So they gave him the strip Thimble Theater, which had nothing to do with what he was supposed to be doing. And it's painfully bad in the early days. You know, the gags are just, they're just so bad. But then over a period of time, he started telling stories. You know, he had Olive Oil, her brother Castor Oil, her boyfriend Ham Gravy, and Nana Oil and Papa Oil. No, anyway, I can't remember. But they all some kind of oil. And Popeye didn't show up for 10 years. Well, 9 years, say. He didn't show up.
I didn't know it was that long.
And by that point, the strip was just about dead. There was hardly any newspapers printing it. But they had this new character, so then the syndicate went out and sold, you know. And but
it was 1928, right?
What's that?
It was 1928.
I might be off on my day. Yeah, it's either I thought it was early 29, but I could totally be wrong. I didn't look it up lately, but then it just started rolling and it turned into a great story strip. But you know, it's funny I mean, I'm not good at telling stories. I mean, well, if you give me a story, I'll try to tell it, but I'm not good. You guys are amazing at, like, you know, laying out panels that tell a story. So I'm as interested as anybody to hear what you guys have to say, you know.
Oh, I think that's kind of, I don't agree with that, Bruce. I've always thought you're a strong storyteller. So I don't think you're giving yourself enough credit there. But that's just me. So let's see. Another example of that would be Gasoline Alley.
Oh yeah.
Gasoline Alley just started out as, it was just like a car gag. It was about cars. It was just a gag strip about cars. And then one day a baby shows up on that guy's doorstep and the whole thing just changes.
Yes.
which I didn't realize.
What was the name of the kid? Was that Skeezix?
Skeezix, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
I think you are right.
And
Yeah, and then
that
like
comic strip aged the characters in real time. 10 years
Right.
after Skeezix appeared, he was a 10-year-old kid.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everyone aged, and over time, it was pretty cool. So let's see, Matt, you got anything you want to throw in?
I
We're just
grew up
kinda
reading
winging it.
Charlie Brown,
Nice.
Peanuts by
That.
Charles Schultz. And that was the comic strip that first told me that all the characters have different characters. Like Charlie Brown was, there was a joke where he was manager of the baseball team, right? He was out in the pitcher's mound and somebody had hit a big high fly ball and he was standing on the pitcher's mound trying to catch it. And all the characters gathered around him and Lucy told him he was going to drop it. He was going to destroy, ruin the game. And every day there was a different character berating Charlie Brown in some way, fitting their personality. And
Right.
I was a really young kid then, and I didn't know that those comic strip characters had different personalities until I read that sequence in Peanuts, and the light bulb went off then. So eventually he landed in his glove, and then it dropped off, and they lost the big game.
Oh,
Charlie Brown just can't win.
No, they always lost the big game, which was the point.
But those 4-panel gags, like that
Peanuts is the
comic
best.
strip that you hold up, that's got everything that a story has. It's got character, conflict, and resolution, all in those 4 panels.
Yeah.
It's like a snail goes into a bar, and the bartender says, "I can't serve you. You'll be here all night, and it's closing time." Snail says, "That's okay. I've called for a ride." "Well, okay." Guy comes in the door and says, "Hey, buddy, your ride's here." And he puts a turtle on the bar. And that's like 4 panels, but that's the same structure as an 8-page story,
Right.
an 8-page mini comic story, or a 24-page newsstand comic, or a 120-page graphic novel, a feature film, a TV sitcom, a country western song, a TV commercial, all have character, conflict, and resolution. So it's like, by doing that daily strip, you're doing a graphic novel a day.
Yeah, in a way you are, because when you're doing something small and self-contained, even if you're doing a continuing story, you want the singular 4-panel unit to be entertaining.
Yeah.
So, like you said, you got to hammer it home, and hammer it home quick. I'm going to try to do the share screen thing here. Give me a second. I'm going to click that. I'm going to hit share screen. I'm going to hit Photoshop.
More Peanuts.
All right. What would you like to? I have no idea what I'm doing.
What are you seeing, Joe?
I'm just trying to get it to allow. Am I good? Okay, let me see.
There it is.
Can you
I'll get it up here. Get it up here in a
Can you
sec.
see my thing?
There you go.
Ta-da!
Okay. Okay, so
Get
you can
back
see
out
my
again.
Photoshop nonsense.
What?
Okay. So if you're seeing this, it's one of my strips, Coyote Coyote. And I got 3 of mine,
There you go.
each with different.
I'm seeing
What's
it.
that?
You're not showing the right screen. I'm seeing your
Oh,
your
God.
cat your StreamYard screen.
Oh, man. I created an infinite hall of mirrors. Okay,
Go
let's
ahead
try
back out and try it again. You got to
Yeah,
pick which one you
Stop
want.
screen.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
How does this work?
There's a choice for show.
It should show you ask you which screen you want to see, because you have more than one window open.
Okay. Is it just going to show stuff online, or can I show like my photo?
You could show whatever
have to-
you can get up on your screen, as long as you pick the right screen.
What's that?
It'll show whatever you have on your screen, but you have
Okay.
to pick the right window. It asks you what window at some point, and you have to pick it.
Okay.
So
So share screen. And then
so we don't get that infinite.
how about applications? Wow.
Okay, that looks like it. There you go.
Alright. Yeah, so you got my Photoshop screens up? Oh,
No.
damn it. I have no idea what I'm doing. Oh, crumb. All right, sorry guys. I'm going to abandon this plan because I have no idea how to make it work.
Just launch Photoshop in that window.
All right. How
Yeah,
do
see
I
if you can do that.
Yeah. Nope. Right, never mind. I'm sorry, guys. That was my bad. Snap screen. All right, I'll just physically grab a couple of strips or something. So just hang on for a second. If you guys got something to yammer about while I'm making a mess of everything, just going ahead.
What comic strips were you reading, Bruce?
All of them.
Yeah.
I love comic strips. I
that
actually in my spare time, like 2 hours a day, I get old newspaper scans and I clip the strips and then I put them up in the I Love Comics archive. And I think last year I did like 15,000 strips. You know, I do like 48 strips a day, but the same strips. So there's a continuity by the end of the year, you know. But I just clean them up, you know, in Photoshop. It takes me about maybe a minute to 2 minutes, depending on the strip, you know, to clean them up and everything. So
That's 2 minutes of the day.
yeah. It keeps me busy, you know.
What's the
My
most
wife-
recent thing you put up there?
I'm sorry.
What is the most recent thing that you put up there?
Oh, I mean, like I said, every day I put up 48 strips. You know, it's just like most of them are from 1954. Now I'm doing the 50s because you won't find a lot of books that have been collected on the 50s, and I don't want those strips to get lost. You know, and that's what the archive is for. They're just there. They're not selling them. They're not charging you to get in. You know, I mean, obviously there's a Patreon thing if people want to join, but you can go there for free. I Love Comics archive on box.com, and there's just tons and tons of stuff up there. But you know, just over the years, just seeing strips. I think, you know, Joseph was talking about strips that tell a gag a day and yet continue and tell a story. Does it get any better than Pogo?
Right.
You know, I mean, wow.
Yeah.
Every day I laughed, but every day, you know, the story moved along just a little bit more, you know.
Yeah. So
Yeah, Joseph?
what's that? Yeah. I got the ones that I was going to share on my screen, but I'll just do it in real time, I guess. So, okay. And now I'm terrible at this. Okay. So it's so backwards to me. So, okay. This is my strip Coyote. And so in the first panel, we get the setup where this one character, Sancho, the little bird guy, is he's been covered in paint because his buddy Panda is an idiot. And then in panel 2, we get a little more setup. So it's like, you know, he's complaining about, you know, helping out. He's just complaining. He should be home watching TV. And, you know, obviously we know what's going to happen because Coyote has a hose and he's annoyed with Sancho. And then panel 3 is the actual payoff or the gag of the strip where Coyote hoses down Sancho and we get a big sploosh or splosh, I guess, sound effect. And Sancho is like, glug. And then I got to remember to go this way because everything's backwards. And then the payoff, you know, the actual gag is in panel 3, but then we have sort of the payoff to the gag where Sancho is now clean, but also, you know, soaked. And, you know, he's like, I hate you so much. And then we also kind of, where's my finger? Nope, other side. There we go. We also kind of have a setup for the next day's strip where Coyote sends him off to go pick up lunch. So that's sort of what I'm talking about, where it's like setup, gag, and then kind of a payoff there at the end. And then, not that one. Whereas, on the other hand, this Dolphin Bros strip, in the setup, we've got our two dolphin. Whoa. Oh, hey.
Hey,
I figured it out.
Okay. Oh, Bruce, did you do that?
Yeah. Which one did you want
okay.
now?
Move on to the same day, but the Dolphin Brothers strip.
Okay.
See, Bruce knows technology.
No,
I don't know
Bruce just
technology.
fumbled onto it.
Still,
come
though,
on.
you know it better than I do.
It's an old computer, so it's loading slow.
Yeah. Oh, this is my Patreon, by the by. So it's got a bunch of crap on it. Let's see. Yeah, it should be.
Oh, newer than that?
Should be Dolphin Brothers from the same day.
Oh, the same day.
So
okay.
7/10.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry. A little further, maybe. Noodles boy. Oh, crap. Sorry, I post a lot of stuff. I apologize. Probably just load more.
the more the better.
Just ignore me. I'll work on it in the meantime.
Okay. So anyway.
So that style of gag writing is it's reminiscent of Doonesbury and Bloom County.
Yeah, see, I grew up with Bloom County.
Yeah, and I grew up with Doonesbury.
Nice.
And I thought Bloom County was a huge swipe.
Oh, it was.
Yeah, it had the
Initially.
same art style, and but like Burke Breathitt had more imaginative characters. Doonesbury was all like a soap opera about characters that could have been real people, kind of like Gasoline Alley.
Yeah, and they grew old. They got married. They got divorced. That one guy lost his leg in Iraq. So Doonesbury, it was very real time. And he's been harping on Trump before it was cool to harp on Trump. So that was kind of cool. Here's another example. And this one, the rhythm's a little different than the previous one. That's why I thought it would be a good example. In panel one, you get the setup. So the two Dolphin brothers are in the background, and in the foreground is this little fish, and he's being swarmed by these angry sharks. And then in panel two, we continue the setup. The sharks are like, I'm gonna eat you, fish. I'm gonna put the chomp on you. And then the actual action and the payoff is in both panels 3 and 4 as the dolphins, smash into the sharks and take the sharks out, which that the sharks have been defeated because they have X's for eyes, because that's what we do in cartoons, people. Is X's for eyes means you've been beaten or you're dead or you're unconscious or whatever. So whereas in the previous one, panel 3 was the climax of the panel, in this one the climax is spread over panels 3 and 4. So it's a little bit of a different rhythm, but you're still kind of doing the same thing. You're setting up the situation in panel 1. You're exacerbating the situation in panel 2, and then you're going for the payoff in the last couple of panels. So let's see. And then Bruce, if you can do the Cosmic Taco strip, that way we can go really far afield. Same day. I think you just got to scroll up 1 from where that one was at. I would like to, that one there. So this one is a weird one, and it kind of can show you what you can do without looking for a gag or without a straight narrative or even without dialogue. And it's pretty simple. Panel 1, the clown character is standing next to this giant stag guy in a forest, and then in panel 2, the stag guy obviously grows, because in panel 1 he was one size, and in panel 2 he's big enough that he can hold the clown in the palm of his hand. And then panel 3 he just keeps growing, and you can see he's like walking over mountains, and like you can see rivers are now tiny compared to him. And then in panel 4 we see the clown is tiny, and he's like hanging on to these antlers for dear life, and we're now like in space and everything. And it's sort of just a way to show that even if you're doing something kind of surreal, or in this case kind of spiritual or mystical, you can even do that with a 4-panel comic strip, you know, if you're careful with what you're doing, I guess. I don't know. So those are my 3 examples of stuff I've done recently anyway, and that sort of thing. So
Thanks. I'm glad you put those up.
yeah. Well, like I said, I thought all of them kind of demonstrate a different approach while still kind of sticking with the core idea. So what about you, Matt? How do you get a feel for the rhythm of a page? Because I know you do a lot of short gag strips too. So that's why I was so glad Bob asked you to be on this panel, because I was like, this guy knows his stuff.
Well, I try and stick to a grid as much as I can.
Yeah.
It sets up a rhythm for me, and it takes a lot of the decision making out.
Yeah.
And these, there's the 6-panel grid and the 8-panel grid, where like each line is a verse of poetry. Introducing characters along, and then something happens, and then you react to that, and then there's a punchline at the end. So I think limitations are liberating.
Yeah.
They make
I'm kind of the same way.
They make things a lot better somehow. In 1980,
See, that was always my thing about like, sorry.
My very first comics in 1980 was a 9-panel grid, probably because I started out drawing comics in my school notebooks. And I would like grid off the page into like 1-inch panels, probably because I watched cartoons on TV, not paying any attention to comic books. And like 30 some years later, I'm still doing it.
Nice. So let's see. Yeah, that's just kind of the thing, because like to me, one of the things I don't like about a lot of modern comics is I feel like storytelling's kind of gotten lost. Because like I said, it seems like a lot of comics have these really complex page layouts that look really cool, but they're hard to read. And I think that takes you out of the experience a little bit. To me.
So daily comic strips would have the advantage of being easier to read.
Yeah, yeah. That's what I like about them. I think they're more accessible too for people, you know, outside of mainstream comics in that way.
Mm-hmm. Like millions of people would read Garfield, and compared to just tens of thousands of people that would read X-Men.
Yeah. That's just it. And again, and it bothers me so much that the newspaper strip is going away, it seems like. You know, because I really like newspaper strips. And you know, it's not just that, you know, there are fewer newspapers, and the newspapers that are still around have smaller and smaller comic strip sections, or have just eliminated comics entirely. It's that on top of it, you see fewer and fewer, I can't think of the word, ambitious comic strips. Like what Bruce was saying about how Thimble Theater was just a gag strip at first, and then it started telling longer and longer stories. And then Popeye shows up, and you're getting these like lengthy epics where, you know, Popeye would go off to some island and fight an entire army by himself or something, you know, and you don't see that anymore. You know, I mean, the really good stuff like Pearls Before Swine or Get Fuzzy, they're good strips, but they don't really have that scope to them. They're very, very simple, very day-to-day type of stuff.
Well, I think one of the newer ones that I really liked was like Funky Winkerbean. Started out as a gag a day, but eventually, you know, not sure if I'm thinking of the right strip now. Oh crap.
Crankshaft.
Maybe that's it. But it was one. It started out as a day, but then it turned. Maybe it is. Yeah, it is Funky Winkerbean. I think. Yeah, it turned into it turned into a story and a good.
Yeah.
And there were some good stories there, you know. And I admire that, you know, and that somebody said, you know what, I like doing gag a day, but I'd like to tell a story, you know. And I think that just, you know, if you can do both, you know, it doesn't get any better. You know, it's just a lot of fun. You know, another one I actually go looking for every day is Rip Haywire.
I've never heard of that one.
Strip, but it usually has a gag every day. You know, it's usually fun to read.
Lynn Johnson in For Better or For Worse did a lot of that good work that way, right?
Yeah, that's right. I forgot about it. Yeah.
I'm going to Google Rip Haywire.
Yeah. And that's kind of the thing I try to do when I'm telling longer stories with my strips is I still try to make sure, like I said, each day's strip has something fun or interesting or exciting. So that even though I'm trying to tell a longer story, overall, I try to make sure each individual unit is sort of its own thing too. So.
Okay, I'm going to try and share my screen.
Cool.
Can you see it?
Not yet.
I didn't see it come through here yet, Matt. I have to okay it when it comes through, and I haven't seen it, so give it another try.
Technology.
Share again.
Well, isn't this where the strip is going? It should be online. You should know how to do this.
StreamYard wants to share the contents of your screen. Choose what you'd like to share. Entire screen, application window, Chrome tab.
Whatever windows you have open show up there.
Okay, this is the entire screen. And do I have to click share again?
There it is. Okay, I'll put her up here. There you go.
So this is Rip Haywire.
Yeah.
I'm going off a minute.
It's got that lantern jaw look from the Dick Tracy and
yes.
The Country Bumpkin one. What is that? Lil Abner. It's got the lantern jaw Lil Abner thing going.
Yeah. But he often gets a gag in there, you know, as every day. It keeps the story moving. There's, you know, strips that just tell a story, but then people forget the strips, you know, because they don't have that gag. I think they work together really well, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Yeah, I get you. Not vegetable oil stuff. Yeah.
This is pretty cool. Look at the time that goes on between these two panels.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a nice time.
Trying to escape from Skull. Oh, crazy. Rip handles it poorly. And this is like weeks later, right?
Yeah.
And some bad guys come in, and in the days panel, There's some soap opera stuff going on there. So now we know about Rip Haywire. Thanks, Bruce.
It's a fun strip. It really is.
Oh, it stops. There we go.
I gotta admit, the infinite void of the infinitely shared screen is kind of hilarious. Yeah. So let's see. Let's see. Matt Brian Wayne Powell in the comments asks, any plans for another Cynical Man movie?
No. Lost enough friends. First one that I don't want to go through that again.
Oh man. I'm sorry, that was a cool flick though. I got a kick out of it.
Well, thanks. It was a labor of love by a bunch of talented people whose talents don't include movie making. Including me. I got to be director. I didn't know anything about it.
That's cool though. Well, I think most like comic book people like secretly have that desire to also make movies because the two are so, the two are pretty closely related, comics and movies. And
the story, panel by panel.
Yeah. I mean, storyboards. That's why so many comic book artists get hired to be storyboard artists for movies, is because it's the same discipline, basically.
Always thinking vision. Yeah.
I'm just saying, at least you got to do like that thing that a lot of people want to do. It's cool.
Yep.
Let's see. I do have my comments on if there are any more questions or anybody would just like to wax philosophical about their favorite comic strips or anything. Please feel free. I have no idea how many people are actually watching this because that's nice.
Where'd that come from?
I think is Bob doing that?
I must be Bob.
I was doing the online con sketches last night in live video.
I just wanted to get your reaction to my sketch.
It's a nightmare and it came true. Someday, you're going to wake up and find out that you're a character in someone else's comic strip.
Yeah.
The fun sketch.
Being drawn by someone you thought you were drawing.
Matt did this one for me.
At your request.
Have a space indeed.
Stick figure Cosmo.
Let's see.
A couple other comments coming up there, guys, if you want to.
Yeah. I've not heard of Popeye's Cartoon Club, so I may have to check that out. Can you talk about single panel gag cartoons like The Far Side? Looks like Matt is on that.
Far Side was great.
Yes, it was.
That was like who was that cartoonist Clyburn with the cat books?
Yeah.
That like broke down all kinds of barriers about what a gag cartoon can be like. And Gary Larson syndicated it. Got a gig with a syndicate, and this was in newspapers everywhere. And this was just a scream. Like every one of them is pure gold. They're so funny and thoughtful and intelligent. So single panel. You got to go character, conflict, and resolution all in one panel.
Yeah. No, they're really hard. I'm experimenting with that with a Pingy Penguin strip right now, and I ain't quite got it yet. So I tip my hat to the single panel gag strip because that's where you're really just boiling everything down to the essence and just that's it. So let's see. Brian Wayne Powell says, question for everyone: what comic character that is not your own would you like to work on? Don't everyone jump in on this one at once.
It never occurred to me.
I'll go ahead and jump on the grenade on this one. Mainstream. I'm the world's biggest Mr. Miracle fan. So, well, maybe not the world's biggest, but I really dig Mr. Miracle. So I would love to do Mr. Miracle. Let's see, underground. I don't know. As far as comic strips go, E.C. Segar was from Illinois, which is where I'm currently at right now, which is why I almost forgot the panel started an hour before I thought it started. But yeah, E.C. Segar was from Illinois, so it'd be cool to do Popeye. And I've drawn Popeye maybe like twice in my life, and I can kind of draw him okay. So it'd be cool to do Popeye. What about you, Bruce?
For me to try Nancy.
Oh yeah, that would be cool.
I'm totally blanking. I'm sorry. The Popeye actually sounds good. That would be a real challenge to try to take it to that level that E.C. Segar or even Bud Sagendorf or
Bobby London?
I'm sorry.
I'll jump in on this one. Yeah. Peanuts. That would be sacrilege if I tried it. I did some stuff in high school with it, but
to be fair, anyone doing Peanuts is kind of sacrilege, though, if you get down to brass tacks. Because I mean, that was so Charles Schultz. Anyone else doing it just seems weird. No matter what.
Regular comics. I actually wrote a script for E-Man and sent it to him. It's probably the only thing I ever did like that. I don't know what possessed me to do it. I just always enjoyed that. Nicola Cutie and Joe Stanton. It's great stuff.
It's because I got to talk about how to do comics the Charlton way. Did you ever see that?
No.
It was like a little digest-sized book about how to do comics, and it made it look so simple that probably made you want to draw, write a script for them.
My buddy Stephen Hagar. Hey, Steve, if you're listening to this, he showed me a picture. Matt, you did the Charlton Ditko heroes last night, right? Yeah, you did I love the question. I don't agree with his moral philosophy, but I've always loved the look of the character with the blank face and the trench coat and the hat.
Do you know there's a new series out right now with the question?
There is.
It's pretty good. Cool. DC Black Label, they rebranded.
The Black Label thing, yeah.
It's like magazine size.
I should track that down because that's probably not in.
Yeah, I think there's 2 issues.
Oh wow, I'll have to get that.
I do own, was it Mysterious Suspense, the one for very first question comic, which is one of my pride of my collection kind of things.
Comic
for you new guys, it's where they based Rorschach on.
Oh yeah.
Oh. A lot of people don't know that.
Really?
A comic book that I'd like to draw, or I'd like to do. Plastic Man.
Oh yeah,
that would be
a good pick. That would be fun. Yeah, I think I had a stretchy guy in one of my books. And when I was a kid, like when you're making up superheroes as a kid, you always want your guys to be like, strong and awesome. So you think like stretchy powers are lame. And then it's like, then you grow up and you're like, man, stretchy powers are awesome. I would totally be stretchy, Yeah. So then you're like,
I always like
then you draw a stretchy guy and you can have fun with them and stick their arms all over the panel, and it's a hoot. So yeah,
I was like Reed Richards, but more because he was the smart guy, not because he was a stretchy guy.
Yeah. What's the thing? You sometimes forget Reed Richards can even do the stretchy thing because he spends most of his time, babbling.
It's kind of lame compared to the other 3.
Yeah.
I got the impression Kirby didn't much like drawing stretchy guys. He was more into like Ben Grimm and the Thing.
Yeah, well, he always liked power.
Power.
Yeah.
Right. See, this is where our what's the the fantasy thing when we're kids. You want to be the strong guy, and that appeals to that age group.
Yeah, when you're a kid, it's all about. That was why I liked the Silver Surfer the best as a kid, because like he was never portrayed very well. But if like you had I had the RPG, and if you saw his stats were nuts. It was like, you know, he could like shoot laser blasts out of his hands, and he was made of metal and everything. And it was like, I want to be that guy. And I want to surf the cosmos forever and leave Earth behind and just forget about Earth. I want to get the hell out of here.
Oh, he was trapped.
I really do now.
Yeah.
He was emo before it was cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but yeah. See, Bruce, I told you we could just ramble about nonsense for like 30 minutes if we had to.
Got about 14 minutes left if you want to keep going.
Yeah.
Otherwise, everybody's just listening to me.
Has there been anything good since Calvin and Hobbes quit?
Like I said, I like Pearls Before Swine. It's a good strip. I like Get Fuzzy. It's a good strip. Mutts is a really good strip.
Oh yeah.
Other than that, Non Sequitur has its moments. Non Sequitur? I don't know how to pronounce that. Whatever.
What's the panel? Bizarro?
Yeah, by Dan Ferraro.
Yes, yeah.
I don't think I've seen that one.
Yeah, I either laugh at it or I'm not quite sure what happened, but you know, most of the time I laugh, you know.
It's another one of those one panel gags that you got to think about, and then it's really funny.
Quite often.
Yeah.
So you got your T-shirt, Bruce.
I got it yesterday. I said to my wife,
the last one I got off.
We got to wash this quick so I can wear it on the camera.
So did anybody else see that Peanuts movie?
I never got around to it.
I own it.
Cool.
It was pretty good. I was you know.
I thought it looked.
When they said CGI, I just cringed. But I think
they messed it up. But I thought they did a good job. Everybody looked right on model, and they acted like Peanuts characters.
It was pretty much all the classic stuff. So
if you ever get a chance to see that animated CGI Peanuts, go for it. Any other comic strips get made into movies? There was a Little Abner movie back in the 50s, right? Or 40s.
Well,
I was watching Blondie this morning.
Yeah, Blondie.
I didn't know about that.
That was
Dick Tracy's on Sunday mornings every week now.
Is that a series?
I don't know how many there are, but for the last couple of weeks, there's been one on Sunday mornings on the Movies channel.
What era was that from?
Serial?
Newer?
I think they were 40s. I think it was 45.
Yeah,
that sounds about right.
But everything that ever existed is somewhere out there.
I've been waiting on the so-so 90s movie to come, or was it 80s? Whatever. The one with Madonna. I've been waiting for it to come on Disney Plus, but they haven't got the rights yet or something. I don't know what the deal is. And then
I thought that was on somewhere. I
haven't been able to find it. So, because I've been kind of wanting to watch it just for the fun of it, but I can't find it.
Garfield has a few movies.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
They've been working on and off on a Popeye CGI film, but every time they get close, someone walks off. So I don't know if that'll ever get finished or not. But what little I saw looked kind of promising. Maybe. I don't know.
Did it look like a 1930s Popeye?
No, it was CGI. It was modern.
Robin
I think the guy
Williams
did
Popeye.
Let's pretend that didn't happen.
There's a lot of mixed feelings about that movie.
It's so weird that like Robert Altman directed that film too. Like the guy that makes all the quiet talkie movies with a cast of like 1,000 people made Popeye. Like how much money did they throw at him to make that movie?
Why would they think he would make a good job of it?
I don't know why anyone would just think that was a good idea to begin with, because it's such a comic strip. I mean, the way everyone looks, the way everyone acts, the everything, it only works as a comic or a cartoon. And doing it live action was just a bad idea.
Generally don't like live action versions of cartoons or old animated features, which makes no sense to me at all.
Yeah.
I'd rather go the other way.
Right. No, I love animation almost as much as I love comics. So like anytime they try to take an animated something and make it a live action something, I die a little inside. Like, I don't know why people seem to think we need a photorealistic Scooby-Doo. I don't know who thinks that's a good idea.
Not I.
Yeah. I have Brian Wayne Powell mentioned there was the Wonderful Wish for Wings That Work Christmas cartoon. I own that on DVD because I saw it in a bargain bin. Oh, it was so good. It's really short though, and I can't believe it got on network TV because it's so weird. Yeah. Beak Brevler. They adapted his Outland. Well, it was actually a children's book starring Opus. It was a Christmas book about how Opus wanted to fly because he was a penguin, and he wishes for that for Christmas. But things take a kind of a weird turn, and then they turned into a cartoon, and the cartoon is super weird. There's like Elvis impersonators and a pig pretending to be a rhino, and a support group for birds that can't fly. It's a really weird cartoon. It's great.
Check that out. Somebody said
Rebecca.
Somebody said Dick Tracy's on HBO Max right now.
Huh, I did not know that. I have HBO Max, but I can't figure out how to watch it because they don't have it on Amazon or Roku. So it's like worthless to me. It's just this thing that exists that I can't watch.
We're in a non-HBO phase right now. Probably pull it back in at some point. We got Watchmen in and we got off.
I have one of those new things called an antenna.
I've got an antenna. I'm this close to cutting the cord, but haven't done it yet.
See, we're doing pure streaming, so and we actually, yeah.
Most of what I watch is streamed, so that's why and I need a little stronger antenna. I'm about 10 miles out of town, so it's when it works, it works. When it doesn't, it just goes off. So
yeah, when it's cloudy, it works. When it's sunny, I
have an indoor antenna. I have to get an outdoor antenna and hook it up in my garage. I'll stick it in the garage, so it'll be indoors. It won't weather.
Let's see. Rebecca Perry Damson says Netflix is doing a live-action Sweet Tooth. Anybody read Sweet Tooth? I never got around to it.
Can't recall.
Was it a comic strip?
No, it's a comic book. I think Vertigo published it. It's by I can't think of his name. He does a lot of good stuff, but I can't think of his name right now because my brain sucks.
Oh.
Looking at the comments, waiting for someone to tell me who does Sweet Tooth. Come on, comments.
Come on, Rebecca. Rebecca will tell us.
Yeah.
Rebecca is one of the sponsors for the Space Prize, so and president of the CXC. So
oh wow,
she's pretty well informed.
Jeff Lemire, there it is. Thanks, guys. Wow. Yeah, that was.
I think I might actually own some of that I haven't read yet, so I need to check it out.
Yeah, I'm so far behind on Jeff Lemire. It's like he's great, but I didn't get in on the ground floor, and now I'm super behind on all this stuff. So Steve's been recommending the Black Hammer to me for like 5 or 3 years now, and I keep putting off getting it because I'm lame. Did I pronounce his name wrong? No.
Lemire?
Yeah. I don't know.
I assume that's it, but
Yeah, no, she just posted it twice. I was just making sure she wasn't correcting my. Oh, Lemire writes the Black Label question book. That dude's everywhere.
I'm oblivious to that kind of stuff. I need to pay more attention. But yeah, I've been enjoying the question book. It's
cool. Yeah, I need to pick that up now. If I ever go to a comic shop again, I'm still kind of dicey on that. So, anyway,
Free comic book summer. They're doing free comic book day like every weekend through September.
What was that? Sorry, you blinked on my screen.
comic book summer instead of a day.
It's free comic book.
Oh yeah, that thing. Right. Yeah.
Check out what the ogre's up to.
Well, I've barely been out of the house, much less at a comic book store.
Well, that's my week. That's I don't know if you saw my week. My sister keeps putting up Happy Friday or something. I said, I don't know what that means. And my week is day, comic book day, pizza, day, call mom. That's my week.
And how much?
Yeah, they're.
I guess you guys almost filled up the time here, so that's
yeah.
Good.
Told you we could ramble about nothing. It's easy. I'm a podcaster now, and Bruce is a podcaster. That's all you do is you just fill time.
I'm not, and I've been scared to death today.
I understand.
So
I thought you guys were faltering on me there, and I thought, oh boy, they're going to leave me here with a half hour to fill.
No.
I don't know if local people remember Steve Boom Boom Cannon was on a local radio station. I got interviewed with him, one of the early spaces, and he gave us an hour, and we got to say about 5 minutes worth of stuff, but he just filled that hour, and it just amazed me that this guy could just talk about nothing at all. He spent like 10 minutes. I have my pencil here. He spent 10 minutes on dropping his pencil on the floor and picking it up. And I'm just, so I was ready. I'm ready to do that. So I'm glad you guys kept rolling here.
It's what those guys do though.
Oh God.
That's
Yeah. I mean, he was a professional. I was just like, I'm not a talker. I do not talk unless I absolutely have to. That's the last resort in my mind. I do things to prevent that if I can. But well, I appreciate all you guys coming for this, and we're waiting for Joe Zabel now. He's going to do realism in comics. So he's got he was on with me for a practice section, and he's got a lot of a slideshow, show some of his work, and I guess delving into other areas of realism in comics. So
you mean he knows how to use the screen share?
Yes, we practiced. You guys could have set up a practice round. We might have had a little smoother going here, but
now we know how it works.
Yeah, we'll be ready when the coronavirus is still happening next year.
That'll be back tomorrow for what is it? What are we calling that? Another. What do we call that? Another panel with Matt Fizel. So, there's Joe right now. Let's pull Joe in.
All right.
Hey, Joe. I'm just trying to throw these guys out.
Yeah, I should probably leave.
Force me to join it a minute early.
The coronavirus is still happening next year.
That'll be back tomorrow for what is it? What are we calling that? Another. What do we call that? Another panel. Do you have something on? Are you watching right now, Joe? Are you watching us on something else? Trying to throw these guys out.
Yeah, I should probably leave.
Force me to join it a minute early.
The coronavirus is still happening next year.
That'll be back tomorrow for what is it? What are we calling that? Another panel. Do you have something on? Are you watching something else besides the computer we're on?
Well, let me fix that.
Yeah, cut the volume off. You can leave it on, but you need to. There you go.
Froze.
Okay.
Okay, so you can hear me live now.
All right.
Yeah, you sound good.
Yeah, I heard myself, and then I heard it repeated like
Right. You're
half a
you're
minute
echoing.
later because of the Facebook link. So
Yeah,
Don't
if
feel
you're,
bad.
if
I did
you're
the same thing.
We
something
did the
else,
exact same thing.
it'll go right through and keep cycling through.
yeah.
So I think we're good now.
All
Yes.
right. Bob,
I was
thanks
just
for
yelling
having
at these
us.
guys for not doing
Very
a
much
practice
enjoy
session.
hearing your chat, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thanks a
So,
lot.
Thanks for having us, and see you next year.
Well, hopefully in person.
Bye-bye.
Hey, Joe.
Hey,
Well
how's it going?
This is the reality and realism in comics panel
Yeah.
with Joe, or presentation, I guess, since it's just you. So
Yeah. And
I'm gonna step off and I'm gonna let you get going here then.
yeah,
And
Bob.
I'll be nearby if you need any help. So.
Yeah, Bob, full disclosure here. I've rehearsed this a couple of times, and the longest I've gotten it to go is 35 minutes.
Okay.
And I did add some new material just before we started here, but I'll try to talk slow, but an hour's time is like
Well,
an eternity.
I'll jump in towards the end and can you see the comments section?
Yes, I think I
You've been
figured
getting
out
a good bit of
screen.
participation from that, so we can do a Q&A at the end. I'm sure people want
Yeah.
to know a little more about Harvey P. Carr and that kind of stuff.
Yes,
So-
yes. I mean, please, folks who are watching, if you have a question or a comment, if you want to tell me I'm full of crap, if you have a personal problem that you would like us to resolve on this show, we have the time. But anyway, so I'll share my screen now and get started. I'm going to do a slideshow followed by a demonstration, short demonstration in Photoshop. Okay?
I'm going to step off and let you go. I'll see you at the end.
Okay. Okay, I think I've got it so that it's working properly now. So let me start the slideshow. Okay, so my name's Joe Zabel. I'm an artist and writer exhibiting at Space. In the 1990s, I worked with Harvey P. Carr on his autobiographical comic, American Splendor. I worked with Harvey for about 10 years, and in the process, I learned a great deal. And I became a real fan and appreciator of his approach to realism and chronicling the details of everyday life. And I took that realistic approach and I used it in my work subsequently. And I also gave the whole concept of realism a great deal of thought. Now, I want to say it's not my intention with this presentation to advocate for realism at the expense of other approaches to comic art, especially not in an event like Space, where you have many, many different styles and approaches that are being promoted. But I do feel that realistic comics as realism have not gotten a sufficient amount of attention. I think they could be more widely understood, and there's a lot that can be learned from this approach. Now, there is no such thing as an absolutely realistic comic. Comic art is realistic by degrees, and it's always mixed up with other considerations. It's mixed up with what the artist's style is, which may be a style that is very individual. It's mixed up with considerations of how the work is going to be printed, whether or not it's going to be in full color or black and white. And it's mixed up with other concerns for composition and focus, etc. So for me, a comic is realistic, basically, when its graphics have a certain amount of detail and a certain degree of richness in presenting the scene, and where it has a fidelity with the real world, so that you get a sense that this is something that a person could experience in real life. I also tend to think that exaggeration, excessive exaggeration, is counter to realism. So you may have a lot of superhero comics that are done in a realistic style, but all the characters look like weightlifters and have big square jaws and don't look much different from each other. And to me, that just doesn't seem realistic, no matter what kind of skill in the drafting is taking place. So I wanted to just step back here in terms of what's going on in comics. Since oh geez, wait a second. I just lost my slideshow because I was trying to get rid of. Okay, now I'm back, sorry. Since its inception, comics have been moved by three basic trends. The first trend is simplicity, an economy of line. And I'm exemplifying that by Peanuts. The notion of minimizing the number of lines so that very tiny panels in a newspaper strip are recognizable and tell a clear story is very important, and it has always been a trend and always will be. The second trend is towards stylization. And by that I mean an intentional repetition of certain shapes and patterns. And my example here is Ernie Bushmiller's Nancy comic strip. If you've ever read Nancy, you know that she is always drawn in exactly, precisely the same way. Her environment is always very flat and very straight-lined and little differentiation. The stylization, I think one of the things that leads to stylization is, first of all, artists do come to the work with a certain amount of style that they're applying to their work. And also stylization and standardization of the rendering is a way for an artist to establish their brand so that their work is instantly recognizable and is not confused with some other work. Finally, the trend that interests me the most is the trend towards realism. It certainly was not developed overnight that comic strips could be realistic, because the pictures are so small and the stories are often very constrained. But there are some very strong masters of illustration who went to the comic book medium and who were able to make realism work within that format. My example here is Milton Caniff from a Steve Canyon strip. I'd like to step us through some of the high points of realism in comics. And first off, inevitably, we need to start with Hal Foster, one of the finest illustrators who ever worked in comics, and whose pages and panels have a balance and composition to them that rivals any realistic illustration that has been done. To preserve the fidelity of his illustrations, in fact, Foster did not use sound effects or word balloons in his work. And for example, in this case, you can see that some dialogue that Prince Valiant is shouting for Eileen is embedded down in this caption. We mentioned Milton Caniff earlier. He's certainly one of the greats of comics and one of the most influential cartoonists who ever lived. What he was able to do was to bring a gritty realism to his portrayal of war scenes. And he did it with the use of a lot of authentic detail in his work, and also with a style that made very heavy use of solid blacks to kind of ground the work and kind of pull together the details without overwhelming the panel. In the page on the left here, it's a very heavy dialogue scene where the commanding officer is delivering a speech, which, by the way, that speech was read into the congressional record. You'll notice that every panel is different and looks at this dialogue scene from a different point of view, and in the process shows a lot of revealing stuff about the airfield that they're standing in. And not only that, but the artwork relates back to what the commanding officer is saying. For instance, in the panel in the lower left side here, he's talking about the men in the ground crew. And lo and behold, we see ground crew staff working on an engine in the foreground. So even for a heavy dialogue scene like this, Caniff invested everything in making the artwork stirring and authentic. This scene over on the right, I happened to grab a screenshot of it that was in the Spanish language. But that doesn't matter too much because the majority of the page is silent. Starting with the second tier here, the woman walks away, she turns back, she runs back to Terry and gives him a farewell kiss, and then boards her plane in tears. I think few artists of the time could have matched this scene for just the cinematic composition of it that communicates so effectively while never being confusing or dull. Will Eisner was one of the most innovative cartoonists who ever lived. Each episode of The Spirit featured a new twist in storytelling conventions. For the story shown here, 10 Minutes, Eisner dramatized the last 10 minutes of a young hoodlum's life, with the clock ticking in the corner of the upper left panel of each page. In the course of this scene, Eisner lovingly depicts every detail of the soda shop interior and lets the tension mount as incident piles upon incident until the body of the murdered shop owner is discovered. EC Comics expanded the horror genre to include modern stories in the vein of Alfred Hitchcock and Shirley Jackson. They employed masters of realistic rendering, such as George Evans, who did these 2 pages, to convincingly depict scenarios that unfolded in contemporary suburban towns. Nowhere was safe in an EC Comics story, not even your own backyard. In the early 1960s, Jack Kirby revitalized the superhero genre with his brilliant costume design and dynamic action sequences. Some people forget, though, that at the time, he was the foremost realistic comic artist of his day. His work had a nice gritty texture to it, lots of dimension, well-rendered people, and just an enormous amount of imagination in how he portrayed a scene. By placing his superheroes into a kind of a real New York sort of environment, he made the superhero genre much more exciting than it had been before. And pretty much Marvel Comics overwhelmed its competition at DC with these characters. Meanwhile, in Europe, the bande dessinée genre was taking off, which had a much wider choice of genres and more mature and adult stories. Lieutenant Blueberry, shown here, was one of the most popular of the comic books. And that's because the artist Jean Girard had a passion and a talent for rendering Western scenes with a great deal of authenticity and texture and detail. Girard would later become famous in the United States for his science fiction comics drawn under the name of Mobius. But as you can see here, before Mobius, he had a whole other life as a master of Western illustration. Richard Corbin is a very odd character in comics, producing underground and overground work that seems very intent on the fantasy genre and on Corbin's own personal sexual fantasies, to be frank. But what set him apart is his work that was full-toned and in most cases in full color, and that used a kind of a painterly technique as opposed to just a flat color that sits on top of line drawings. In this story, In Deep, was kind of set apart from a lot of his other work in that the scenario is completely realistic and credible, of the 2 characters having their boat sink and being stranded with only a life protector to cling to, a life preserver. What's really notable here is the way that Corbin renders the water. He certainly doesn't use one technique to do it. I see every panel seems to be a somewhat different rendering, but they kind of blend together, and they produce a sense that the water is churning and is semi-transparent and really surrounding them all around. And I think over the course of the story, it's this feeling about the water that creates a overwhelming sense of dread in what's going to happen to the characters. In the 1980s, American comics were revitalized by an influx of British talent whose work was darker, more complex, and realistic. Alan Moore, in particular, came to prominence as one of the greatest writers who had ever worked in the comics medium. V for Vendetta, shown here, is an example where he worked with artist David Lloyd to portray a shadowy and grim future London that is quite credible and quite menacing. Meanwhile, in Japan, artist slash writer slash animator Katsuhiro Otomo became a rising star in the manga scene. Shown here are pages from one of his earlier works, Domu, A Child's Dream. It's a tense graphic novel about mysterious suicides in a vast apartment complex. In this work, Otomo makes the apartment complex one of the characters. And the many balconies and the repeating patterns of the architecture kind of loom over everything with a kind of grim foreboding. Otomo went on from here to create the landmark manga and anime hit Akira. In the 1990s, companies like Dark Horse and Oni Press successfully marketed black and white comics to American comic book shops, opening the door to edgier and more realistic works, some of which were picked up by Hollywood for adaptation to television and movies. The example we're showing here is Greg Rucka and Steve Lieber's graphic novel, Whiteout, which is a prime example of this trend. As shown in these pages, Lieber employs authentic-looking background details to help sell the idea that this is all taking place in a remote outpost in Antarctica. This graphic novel went on to become a movie. You may not have heard the movie because it was very poorly received, but I don't think that was the fault of Lieber and Rucka. Meanwhile, mainstream superhero fans were clamoring for new motion pictures that would depict their favorite characters in live action. They would have to wait for the release of Spider-Man in 2002, but in the meantime, artists like Alex Ross helped fill the gap. In the comic titled Marvels, Ross applied a Norman Rockwell-esque realism and color to highlight key moments from Marvel Comics history. Elsewhere, in the utterly non-mainstream world of post-underground small press comics, writer Harvey P. Carr was carving out a new and unprecedented autobiographical comic genre with American Splendor. P. Carr had no interest in the spectacular and sensational. Instead, he focused all his attention on mundane incidents from his personal life. Incidents such as making a glass of lemonade or having a conversation with a neighbor about the parking situation. I worked with Harvey for 10 years, and as I said earlier, I learned a great deal from him. These 2 pages are pages that Gary Dumm and I collaborated on. As you can see, this one page maybe not quite as mundane an event. It's Harvey appearing on the David Letterman show and getting under Letterman's skin so that during a commercial break, he cusses Harvey out. So, American Splendor was very influential on the development of the comics that came afterwards, particularly comics with an autobiographical slant and journalistic comics. The example here is Palookaville, which by the artist Seth, which is a very, very realistic scenarios that are, my understanding is that they're autobiographical in nature. You'll notice that Seth's style is kind of an interesting mixture of a realistic style with a highly stylized approach, so that his characters are immediately identifiable as the work of Seth, and at the same time, you have a full sense of the house that this aging character is living in. In the journalistic vein, Joe Sacco, who worked briefly as an artist on American Splendor, created a landmark series of works about wartime scenarios, starting with Palestine, pages of which are shown here. In this particular example from Palestine, we see an earlier scene where a person is being tortured in kind of a subtle, quote unquote, legal way. And then later on, at the end of the story, that person is released, and we have this wonderful panel at the very end where it shows them entering back into society. And this shows how Sacco, who often drew in kind of a cartoony fashion, was able to provide enormous depth to his drawing when he felt like it, and in this case to very great effect. Another artist who worked on American Splendor and who more recently has created a best-selling journalistic graphic novel is Josh Neufeld. For AD, New Orleans After the Deluge, Josh called upon his experience as a Red Cross volunteer in the weeks following Hurricane Katrina, as well as conducting extensive interviews and research. As graphic art, AD is a triumph in conveying the magnitude of the event and its effect on countless survivors in fear for their lives, which these two panels kind of brings that together in a stunning sequence. Eisner Award-winning artist and writer Tilly Walden is one of the most intriguing artists on the current scene. Her previous work, On a Sunbeam, was a sprawling, surrealistic adventure in outer space. With her new book, Are You Listening?, she adopts a more down-to-earth backdrop, a late-night road trip in western Texas, which, with her inimitable style, she transforms into a kaleidoscopic dance of color and shape. In a way, Walden's presentation is more realistic than a series of coherent illustrations because she captures the constantly shifting light and motion of an actual road trip. This is another brilliant sequence from Are You Listening? In this case, Walden is evoking the claustrophobic tension of her character shopping in a old store with shelves very close together. Adrian Tomine, in his anthology comic Optic Nerve, has been slowly building a body of work of unparalleled excellence. These pages are examples of his recent issues. The page on the left is from a story titled Translated from the Japanese, and it is a dramatic departure from conventional comic storytelling. In it, the graphics consist of a series of illustrations of the interior of a passenger plane. And the passengers themselves are barely present. Like on this page, you just see this arm here and this hand here. The captions tell the story of a woman's trip to the United States with her young son, and seem very much detached from what is visually going on. The page on the right, also Adrian Tomine, is from Killing and Dying. Though the layout is done in a more conventional style, we're required to watch the characters closely as the story unfolds, bending forward to peer closely into the tiny panels. Details, such as the blanket draped over the wife's legs, take on an added significance when we learn of the later events taking place in the story. So to wrap up the slideshow, I'd like to summarize some of the qualities that realistic comics contribute to the comics medium. First of all, providing context. This is a close-up from the Adrian Tomine strip I was just showing you. And you get quite a sense of this character just from what you're seeing in the pictures. You can tell that he's of a certain age, that he seems a bit melancholy, that he is in a very well-ordered, clean household. And the fact that he is doing the dishes while his wife and his daughter are in the other room talking, that has some significance and may allude to some things that will take place later in the story. Another function of realism is to bolster the credibility of the story. If John Giraud for Lieutenant Blueberry had merely drawn a bunch of cowboys standing around, it wouldn't have convinced anyone that the story really took place in the Old West. By creating layer upon layer of authentic detail, the artist successfully grounds a story in the past era. In the same vein, artist Steve Lieber develops the Antarctic Research Station to the point where we feel the cold in the isolation. Finally, realism plays an important role in transforming a comic into an immersive, sensual experience. The environment, in effect, becomes a story, and for a brief moment, we forget where we are. For the story In Deep, Corbin's attention to detail in depicting the ocean pays off as we begin to taste the saltwater tang while adrift under the burning sun. For Tilly Walden's automotive odyssey in Are You Listening?, every setback, from a traffic jam emerging traffic to an unfriendly truck stop, becomes unruly, threatening experiences. So that ends the slideshow, which I hope you enjoyed. And I wanted to see if there were any questions yet.
Joe, I'm back.
Oh, I was going to go on to the other part, Bob, but I just wanted to
you got
see
more?
if there was any
Okay.
it looks like they were just talking about a technical issue right here. So let me go back to, am I still sharing?
Yeah, I can get it up. Yep.
Okay. Okay, so
Gotta get your the right window up. There you go.
okay, so for my Photoshop demonstration, I'd like to talk about a page I'm working on right now and break down some of how the elements are created. In this particular story, this is page 4, and we're following a young man who graduates from college and gets an office job. And in the process, this fellow is developing, let me say, some antisocial tendencies. And the importance of this page is to introduce us to his family life so that the reader can understand what may be at risk if his antisocial tendencies get out of hand and perhaps he loses his family. So first of all, notice the warm color scheme, the wife who's happy, the children who appear to be happy, the comfortable looked-in live of the home. All of these are intended to provide context to the story so that we know what is at risk for this character. Now, just blew up. I'm going to focus on what it took to put together panel 1 here. So I start with just a pencil drawing of a character. I do all of the elements separately. You'll notice that she's pointed in the opposite direction of the way she's pointed in the final panel, and sometimes that's just by accident. In this case, I find that I can draw a character and profile much better when that character is facing to the left. So I just faced her to the left with the idea I could turn it around in Photoshop. And by the way, I use photos for reference. This is kind of a sticking point with me, that it's very hard to find photos that I really can have faith in over the course of a story to represent the character. In this case, it seems to have worked out pretty well with these two. Also, I've tried in the past to say, okay, I'm only going to use a character if I can show them from many different angles, so that I can draw them from different angles. But that really cuts down on the choices, and you still end up in situations where you have to draw the character from an angle that you don't have them. So I just, in this case, I'm just using this one photo for all the references. But I do keep that up while I'm drawing the character and try to maintain fidelity with that. So to ink the drawing, I just do it in Photoshop. I have not been very happy with my results of inking in the traditional fashion. I think I lose a lot of the spontaneity. And so about a year ago, I started this approach, and I've looked for feedback. Everybody seems to think that it works okay. So that's her. This is the fella from that panel. And this is the background. Now, if you're involved in realistic drawing, one of the things you have to deal with is straight lines. If you make all your straight lines with a straight edge, the work develops a very brittle, deadening effect. And I am not a fan of that. What I've started to do is, if the line is really supposed to look straight, I just make an effort to draw it straight. And that usually produces something that simulates a straight line, but has a certain amount of spring to it, seems more lively. In this case, I'm trying to make the home look very lived in and comfortable. So I went with a completely casual approach to sketching in the background. So, oh, I'm sorry. I was supposed to have pre-prepared this before I started this lecture. So let me do that quickly. Okay, so here I am, starting with a blank slate. I put in the background, a little black wedge there to give it a little more weight. And so there is the completed composition. Now, one of the advantages of putting things together this way is that I can really play around with the spacing and the size and the positioning of everything until I have it just how I want it. And, you know, and without taking a great deal of time to get an elaborate drawing perfect the first time. So I'm sure you've seen many color demonstrations. You know, I've been coloring for a little over a year and a half in Photoshop, and this is what I've come up with. First, this is just the color layer. I tend to like to use sort of light beige colors, just because I think it makes things blend together a lot better without having to come up with a consistent coloring plan. Also, when I'm creating these colors, I make selections of the major areas, and then I save those selections for later. So I don't think you can see that there's a selection around the female character now. But you see, if I can do anything I want with that. You know, after the fact. So that's the color layer. Then, and these layers, by the way, have an attribute of multiply, which means that the colors laid on top are transparent and you can see everything below them. So this is the layer for the light and shadow. And you can see it's really a fairly simple lighting scheme that uses a sort of a warm gray, which is appropriate for incandescent light for interiors. So then when you combine that with the color, it kind of blends together so that you get a very simplified, easy on the eyes version of you know, of realistic lighting and kind of a painterly effect. Finally, there is a layer that has an attribute of soft light, and I use that for highlights. In this case, I only used it to punch up the light on the two sconces right here. But so that is my Photoshop demonstration, and I hope you enjoyed it. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And so you'll see my ugly face again. Let's see.
Looks like you got a few questions over there in the comments.
Okay, so this is so strange. When I try to shift it, it goes to an advertisement about Jumanji. But
well, if you can't see, I can read some of them for you.
Oh, I can read them now. I'm going from the top here.
I can do this too.
What? Oh, I don't know what you did, but you know.
I'm in control over here.
Okay.
tackle that one. There's a few more, so we can fill up the.
Oh,
About 10 minutes.
there's some above Josh's. Yeah, Josh is a former American Splendor artist, so I have to really take anything he says with a grain of salt.
Oh, yeah, I have a few
He
of his
was able
books.
to work with Harvey, and that that is scary thought. Okay, so I think the first comment was picture blurred. Okay.
We got that I think that got sorted out.
Yeah. It's good to take the wax paper off of the camera lens. That helps out with the blurring quite a lot.
Somebody else had an issue, but they figured it out. So yeah. I think you were clear. I checked on my phone and you look pretty good. So.
Oh, I see now. I switched back to the StreamYard thing, and I see what you're doing here. This is great. So I can see Josh's question from StreamYard. So he's saying, if I heard him right, Joe Z says he has more spontaneity when inking digitally than when inking traditionally. That's true, but let me put that in perspective. Basically, what I'm doing, just breaking all of the rules, and I'll probably be, run out of the business for doing this, is I do pencil drawings, then I scan them into Photoshop, and I manipulate them and make them look like inks. So naturally, if you're working with your pencil, and free sketching, you're going to have a lot more spontaneity than if you're working with a Crowquill pen and have to worry about the ink smearing all the time. So anyways, that's the approach I've taken to that. And like I say, it may doom my career, but, at this point, I don't care.
I hear a lot of different variations on exactly what you're talking about. So I don't think they're throwing you out for that. So here's
That's extremely surprising to me. I always thought that the constant Control-Z option of digitally inking takes away from spontaneity. Yeah, for one thing, I couldn't get my tablet to work when I started working in comics, and I just didn't have the time or patience to make the tablet work. I know years in the past when I first got a Wacom tablet, it worked fantastic. And I did a lot of work that way. But most of it was not black and white comics. It was mostly taking 3D pictures and playing with them and enhancing them and, putting in extra hair and all kinds of things like that. But I've talked to a lot of artists who ink digitally and who create their work entirely in the digital realm. And I think especially if you have the training for it and it, comes natural to you, then, that's great. In my case, I'm using it, the way I'm working now is really very similar to the way I worked years ago on American Splendor. I used to make all these drawings, and I had a light board and a piece of, a piece of artwork, and I would Xerox the drawings at different sizes using a conventional Xerox machine, and then I would, piece them all together on the back of the Bristol board, and then I would trace all of my drawings meticulously, and I would send them off to Gary Dumb to ink. So it's not really a lot different than that. It's just that, Gary's kind of busy and I can't afford him, and so I do it my way. So.
that last part.
And Yeah, like I say, the layering, that's something I picked up way back when I was working with Harvey, is to create the different elements separately and then put them all together, because then you can nudge things this way or that. You can flip the drawing over. Like if you have a background drawing that you want to use, and you say, oh, this isn't working because the character is standing here. You can't see this nice potted plant I have in the background. Well, you can flip the drawing over and then you can see the potted plant and work with it like that. Let's see what else to say about that. Oh,
So we got a few more, but I think we only got time for about one more. I see our
I'm
next
running
panel
out of
guys.
time. This is great.
Yeah, you
I was
make
so
me
worried
talk.
we could have a half
Thank
an
you.
hour. Okay, so
Let me fill up a half hour. Thanks.
just full disclosure, Ashley is my daughter-in-law, and actually, what inspires me to write my stories, it's all about family, you know. No, it's I get inspired by a lot of things. At one point, I kind of broke away from doing comics and was trying other things, you know, acrylic paintings. And one of the things I tried was writing flash fiction. And I got a few pieces published, but in the process, I wrote maybe about 40 different flash fiction stories. And it really caused my sense of creativity to explode. For one thing, working in a different medium, you know, just all text, and working in that very short format, it was really great for me. So, and that's what my comic Emperor Tom and Other Stories comes from. So, I think you have to go on to the next guy now.
Well, this is a quick hitter. I think you can answer that one.
Oh, Daniel Clowes? Oh, definitely. I'm a big fan of Daniel Clowes. I mean, there's really a lot of artists I couldn't include. I just didn't have time. And Daniel Clowes is a big inspiration to Adrian Tomine, who is like my favorite artist. So, yeah, I love Daniel Clowes' work.
Bring Jersey in. Jersey is the director of the CXC. How you doing, Jersey? I don't think I've ever seen you. We've sent emails and messages back and forth, but it's good to see you. Been better if we could have done this live somewhere, but or, you know,
yeah, it would have been better to do it face to face, but here's where we are, right?
Okay.
So, but thank you for putting this together. You know,
I enjoy it. That's why I do it. I'm not thrilled about being on screen as long as I've been, but
I bet this is a little bit like doing a telethon, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, just and then Joe started. Oh, he's off already. Joe is an American Splendor artist and does a lot of his own work now, and
that's really cool.
Known him for a long time. He I think we took some road trips to SPX in the early years.
Oh, wow.
So we didn't get to talk about that too much. But so I understand Mr. Smith is going to show up here at some point.
He should be here pretty soon. He was going to get here right at 2. So I sent him the link to the thing. Jeff and I are going. So Jeff Smith, the artistic director of Cartoon Crossroads Columbus, is going to be here to walk through the last 5 years of the show. And I'm going to be contributing from the perspective of the interim executive director of the show, but also as somebody who has been to every CXC. So I've got this unique perspective of somebody who's now working on the show, but has been attending it since its inception. So I have, can reflect on it both from both perspectives. So it will be fun. Jeff and I walked through it yesterday, and I think it's going to be a good time talking about, the value that events like Space, like CXC bring to their local communities, and the work of advocacy to create incidental connection between the public and comics as a medium, and I went to space actually for the first time last year when I first moved to Columbus. And so I'd heard of space for a long time, never been able to attend. I lived in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Don't judge. I moved to Columbus. I chose Columbus over Ann Arbor. So anybody who gets a little bit
Just made a lot of points locally here.
Yeah, I'm sure I did. Yeah, that was another thing that as a comics person and not like a terribly sporty person, I was completely unaware of that until I moved here. And then, like when I was looking for an apartment.
A lot of art going on in this city that gets overshadowed. And we won't go into that.
We don't have to, no. But yeah, so I never managed to get down here for space. And so I went, having moved here, I went last year and I was like, oh my gosh, this is just like the shows that I started. It gave me that flash of nostalgia of the very first shows I ever went to, like way back in like 1992, 1991, like the Artist Alley at the Motor City Comic Con, right? Where it was like just like a bunch of cool mini comics people who were just doing like, like the Matt Feasels of the world. Like that's where I met Matt Feasel for the first time.
I hung out with Matt at least at one of those years ago, but
yeah, and just
up that way.
And
here's Jeff.
Is he here?
Yep. Hey Jeff.
Right.
Hey, how's it going?
Great. My last panelist didn't make me fill up time, so I'm feeling good.
All right, let me get my screen share up.
I'm gonna do some screen share. Yeah, I've got to let you in for that, but I'm gonna jump off and let you guys go.
Are we actually? When do we start? We're not actually on.
You are live right now.
Oh, hey!
You've been live since 11 o'clock. Here's your screen. Is that a good arrangement for you, or do you want to fill the whole screen?
That's what I think. That's fine. What do you think, Jersey?
Yeah, I think that's great.
All right. Yeah.
But I'm gonna get off. I'll be here if you need anything, listening in. But you can get going then. So
great.
Talk to you at the end here. Thanks.
Thanks, Bob. So thanks everybody for watching and participating in Space 2020 online. My name is Jersey Drozd. I am the interim executive director of Cartoon Crossroads Columbus, and with me is the artistic director of Cartoon Crossroads Columbus, Jeff Smith. Hey, Jeff.
Hey, hi Jersey. How you doing? Hi everybody at Space. Yeah, we are. Space is like the original first indie comic show in Columbus, and it was part of that first generation that started up in the mid '90s. And that is where my heart is in the indie scene. I love it. It's very cool. So I'm very proud to be here.
I was just telling Bob that exact thing just as you were getting here. It's like I only went to space for the first time last year, and I got this flash of nostalgia of like, this is what like the Artist Alley at Motor City was like back in like the early 90s, when you'd had all like the cool dynamic indie people who were doing the fold and stapled mini comics and, like trading tips on like how to Xerox to get the best grayscale quality. Like I remember getting into arguments with guys at Artist Alley back then. Like, no, you set the threshold to this. So it's really cool to be a part of this. So for our participation for the next 50 minutes or so, what we thought we would do is kind of highlight the last 5 years of Cartoon Crossroads Columbus, maybe talk a little bit about what we're going to be doing this year for 2020, and really highlighting how with events like CXC and Space, Columbus is just this amazing town for comics. And I introduced myself as the interim executive director, yes, but I have also been to every CXC since it started. So I started out as an attendee, a participant. I never tabled at the show. I just went because it was such a rich experience. And you've heard me say this a bunch of times, Jeff, like driving home for the first time, me and my wife, Ann, who works at the Billy Ireland Cartoon Library Museum now, we were driving home and I was just like, that whole darn town just loves comics. The whole city celebrates comics. And you go to a lot of other comics festivals or comic shows, you go to like one of the Wizard World shows, or you go to, SPX, and like, they're awesome, super cool. They're like comics camp, right? In this hotel. But like, when I went to CXC, the thing that blew me away was, okay, there's stuff happening at the Columbus Museum of Art. There's stuff happening over here. There's stuff happening. It's the whole city is like active with celebrating this medium. So I'm wondering if we could start with Jeff. How did this thing begin?
It started. It started when I noticed around 2010 or so. I don't remember the exact year, but I did notice that all of a sudden, all the individual art institutions in Columbus, the Columbus Museum of Art, CCAD, the Wexner Center, all these places were starting to have exhibits by world famous cartoonists and inviting world famous cartoonists to give talks at their institutions. For example, CCAD had Marjan Satrapi, the cartoonist of Persepolis, come and talk to the students. That's a world-class event. And if my memory serves me, they actually had to have an overflow audience room where they had a video so that people could get in there. Another example was right around 2010 again, you remember R. Crumb did the Book of Genesis? He drew as a comic book, the entire Book of Genesis.
Yeah.
And it was like 300 pages, and the Columbus Museum of Art, this blew me away, actually hung and displayed each original page of art, which is, about like that big, in sequential order around 5 galleries. So you could go in and like walk around 5 galleries, and you could, if you had the time, read the entire Book of Genesis on Robert Crumb's original artwork. And that knocked me out. And of course, the Wexner Center, they had a Dan Clowes exhibit. They did an exhibit with my work. And of course, the Billy Ireland has had regular cartoonists coming to visit for decades. Lucy Caswell, the founding curator of the Billy Ireland Cartoon Library and Museum, used to throw this thing called the Triennial Festival of Cartoon Art. And every 3 years, it was a very small academic event. Only 300 people attended, but the cartoonists were, Sergio Aragones, Bill Watterson, the lady that does Kathy Geiswhite. Just Mort Walker, the Garfield guy, Jim Davis. It was a who's who of cartoonists.
Jeez.
I met Will Eisner there. I met Art Spiegelman there. So it was this fantastic festival that started up in the 80s, right when I was going to Ohio State. And I was kind of hanging out in the early version of the Billy Ireland. At that time, it was called the Library for Communications and Graphic Arts, or the Milton Caniff Library for Communications.
Oh, that's right, because that started with a bunch of Milton Caniff original art. That's like
how
it was founded, right?
Milton Caniff is an OSU alum, and as he was getting ready to retire, he donated all his papers and a lot of his original art to OSU, and they didn't know what to do with it. Nobody knew what to do with it. And Lucy Caswell said, I'll take a crack at it. And she immediately began acquiring more art, different art, getting art, going to like the National Cartoonist Society. And here was this very intelligent, academic, professorial, and kind of attractive young woman shows up at these cartoon things, and she's treating these cartoonists like they're real artists. Cartoonists know they're real artists, but we don't get a lot we don't really get a lot of respect from the outside world. So having her show up at these things, suddenly she was able to convince people, don't sell your art cheap, don't give it away. It's important. Preserve it, save it. And in many cases, people would end up donating, their paper and their artworks, as I did, to the Billy Ireland Library.
That's I think worth underlining as we progress through this presentation, is that we in the comics industry, of course, we all respect and revere the medium, and we respect what we do. But a lot of us, most of it, if not all of us, prior to 2006, if you're at a cocktail party and somebody says, "What do you do?" "Oh, I make comic books." "Oh, that's cute. That sounds like fun. What do you do for a job, though?"
Yeah. What do you do in your spare time?
So when you walk into the thing that like just arrested me when I came to CXC for the first time is like I'm walking into places like the Billy Ireland, and it's like, here's the Will Eisner seminar room, here's the Schultz auditorium. I'm like, what? They have rooms named after cartoonists? What is this, France? So
that kind of segues me back to how this all got going, because in around 2014 or 13, Lucy Caswell, the founding curator, approached my wife and I, Vijaya Iyer, who's my business partner and has been publishing Bone and my other projects for close to 30 years now, very close, 29 years. And Lucy said, you know, the festival needs to be updated, needs to be re-envisioned for a new era. I mean, comics had changed since she started. Back then, comics were pretty much just newspaper comics and editorial cartoonists. But we thought, well, it needs to include comic books, it needs to include graphic novels, and it needs to include animation, it needs to include cartooning in all its divisions, or it's just the exact wrong word I wanted to use. It's it's styles or whatever. And and at that point, Vijay and I had spent the better part of 2 decades going around the world visiting comic book shows in all over the place, like in Europe or in South America or in India, all over the place, Canada. And what we suggested was, since I had just noticed that our little town, which is not a little town, it's the biggest city in Ohio, but our community was starting to embrace cartooning. And we suggested 2 things. One, let's ask all the other art institutions to invite their big cartoon guests, because they were all doing it once a year. Why don't you invite your cartooning guest on this? Well, do it on the same weekend, and then we'll turn Columbus into a destination event. And the second idea was to instead of doing a typical American Comic-Con, which is in a convention center or in a hotel ballroom or something for the whole weekend, let's base it on these European festivals we were visiting, where there was a great deal of moving about the city, mostly usually on foot, but not always. Sometimes everybody was getting into cabs or whatever, or being shuttled around. But the city itself was a player, was a character in the show. When you go, our favorite show of all time is Lucca in northern Italy, not far from Florence. It's a medieval ringed city. Cars aren't really allowed in the center, and you could shoot a movie about Michelangelo there, and you wouldn't have to do anything except hide the power lines. And in the center of the city, they have a tent, and they do have a pavilion, so there is a place for commerce and business and selling of comics. But around this, you have to walk around this medieval city to get to little. There's an old stable that's been converted into a museum and a gallery, and you can
that's awesome.
You can see Karl Barks displays of art, or Will Eisner, or Hergé, Tintin, Mobius, and that was it. So that was the idea. We thought Columbus, because Columbus is really a fun town. I mean, it's a good town. We have as good a food here as anywhere. I mean, yeah, if you're in New York City, you can get a bazillion kinds of Indian food. But you go to 1 or 2 Indian places here in Columbus, and they're as good as the best Indian food in New York. Chef-driven restaurants, food to table. This is a good, exciting town to spend time in. And our thought was, well, what if you just, you spend 2 days up on campus at the Wexner and OSU and the Billy, and then you spend 2 days downtown at the Metropolitan Library and the Columbus Museum of Art and CCAD. And meantime, you can go grab your meal in some cool little short north restaurant or bistro, and you can talk about comics. And that's been the idea, and that seems to have worked. We've had a really good time. This year, of course, there's a little less of that kind of thing going on, but hopefully we'll come back to it soon, someday.
Yeah. When we can gather again, we will do it again, because it's too special of an event not to do. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing that, so stepping back and talking about it from an attendee standpoint, the thing that was so mind-boggling to me was how you crack the code on the siloing that the industry kind of does to itself. Like editorial cartoonists, mainstream superhero cartoonists, the kidlit sort of big five publisher, trade publisher cartoonists. And I have friends from all those different worlds who just don't know each other. They don't know anything about one another. I have people who are friends with in the superhero comics world who are like, what's a Raina Telgemeier? I'm like, what do you mean, what's a Raina Telgemeier? Who's Raina Telgemeier? How can you not know? And vice versa, and so I go to CXC and I see there's Chris Sprouse over there. Chris Sprouse, who drew some of the greatest superhero comics of all time and continues to do, sitting right across from Seth, who did It's a Good Life If You Don't Weaken, and all these like fabulous, like well-designed indie comics. And nobody thinks it's weird. Everybody thinks like, well, yeah, of course they're all here, right?
Well, because the truth is, we all read each other's stuff. I mean, I read Chris Sprouse's stuff. He reads my stuff. We all read each other's stuff. We don't. I don't just. I mean, we've had Michael Bendis here. We've had Matt Fraction.
Let's talk about them. Let's talk about like the. Oh well, let's just for a second. Let's talk about the founding, and we'll talk about the guests, because I want to talk about the founding of the show and the vision for the show, because you talked about like all these different places in the town, but like what kind of things happened at past CXCs? We'll go into more detail, but just like a broad overview of like creating an experience that is like rich in a lot of ways for a lot of different audiences.
Well, we have intimate events that are, smaller, maybe 25 people in a room, which it could be either at a panel or it could be at like what we call teach and talks. And teach and talks are, more educational. There were famous cartoonists like Charles Vess will come in and talk for 45 minutes on, showing you the process and the drawings behind his latest project. And then we'll have medium-sized ones. We'll have giant events like at Mershon, where there's 2,000 seats, on a big, beautiful stage. And we have some pictures of that later. We'll show you. Might even be, no, they're not on the screen. We have medium-sized events like at the Wexner Film and Audio Auditorium Library. It's really good, and there's a lot of time for cartoonists to attend each other's events and to spend time together. And that was very important to me. And that was a direct holdover from Lucy's original show, because Lucy's philosophy came more out of academia, and there was a lot of congeniality and what I would just call sportsmanship. Everybody's equal and everybody's friendly, and collegiality is probably that's the real word I'm looking for, collegiality. Yep. And there's a lot of that. And like you said, you'll have Art Spiegelman, talking to Rafael Rosado in earnest. I saw them standing there in the Billy Ireland reading room. I don't know what they were talking about, because I was way back away taking a picture. But they were really, they were happy. I mean, they were talking about something that was fascinating to them, whatever.
Yeah. That does sum up the tone. And like, I love being in the Billy Ireland on the first couple of days, because all the cartoonists are there and we're all 12-year-olds again, getting really excited about looking at this original masterworks in front of us all over, because in the library, they pull out a whole bunch of original art and lay it out for us to just, gasp over.
That's an astonishing thing. If you're there, you can sign up for maybe every 2 hours. I don't remember how often they do it. The Billy Ireland will take guided tours behind the scenes to this vast Ark of the Covenant filing system where you can see original Calvin and Hobbes, you can see original Gary
Peanuts.
Trudeau's, original Milton Caniff's. Just absolutely mind-blowing things.
I have been on the tour dozens of times, and it never ever gets old. I will never get tired of it, because it really is like, it's like a Disneyland for cartoonists. It's like
original George Harriman Crazy Cats.
Yeah.
Now seeing that in person is something you can barely express. But he didn't use whiteout, and he'd have like a huge black sky, and then he like these little scribble clouds. But he didn't use whiteout or white paint. He would just scrape it away with a razor blade, and that left like this really rough texture. And there's all sorts of different textures on it. It's like looking at a topographical map holding this giant, and they're big too. They're big mama babas.
Yeah, they are. They are.
And for me, the talisman like atmosphere of touching this piece of paper that was touched by George Harriman, or God help me, Walt Kelly. It is just it's mesmerizing. It's transporting.
Yeah. That's a great way of describing it. Yes, and that is the tone. That is a tone of the show. Can we also talk about? We got to spend some time talking about Tom Spurgeon, who was the founding executive director, and a lot of the character of the show was guided by him as well, right? I mean, like this was a heroic advocate for artists. And one of my favorite memories of an early CXC going to the show was, it was a panel of, and I won't name names, but people could look it up if they really want to. There was a bunch of different people from the publishing industry who were higher up in the publishing industry, and he was asking them, you know, how is digital affecting sales? And everybody was like, digital is just doing great, and it's not affecting print sales at all. Sales are up, up, up. We're all very happy about digital. We don't feel threatened by it at all. And then Tom looked thoughtful and he paused. He said, how much of that sales is getting back to the artists and the creators? And they all looked uncomfortable. You know, they're like, oh, well, you know, we're not going to talk about numbers here and now. And then they moved on to some other questions. And then about 5 minutes later, and I'm in the audience, I'm like, thank you, Tom. Thank you for like, you know, fighting for us. And then like 5 minutes, 10 minutes later, Tom's like, so I want to get back to that talk about sales. And I came running up. You and Tom were talking at an after party, and I ran up to Tom and I shook his hand vigorously. I was like, thank you for what you did on that panel. I didn't even introduce myself. I was like, thank you so much for what you did. That was awesome. And then I just walked away. And you guys both looked a little bit startled. Then went back to what you were talking about. But anyway, but yeah, so this is all to say that like what he has always meant to me is somebody who really, really cares about cartoonists and the people who make comics. And that spirit was definitely in the show from the start. So I wonder if you could talk about your perspective, like working with Tom.
Well, I met Tom in 1994 over the phone. He was the managing editor and then later the executive editor of the Comics Journal, which was, and still is to a degree, but they've sort of slowed down. But back then they were the Rolling Stone. They were the journal of record for the comic book industry and were the original comics are art people. They really believe that. And I did an interview with Gary Groth in 1994, and Tom he came in to do the clean up the copy editing and all that kind of stuff. And we were talking on the phone. Turns out he was an Indiana Midwestern boy like myself, and we just hit it off. We had a similar sense of humor, similar view of the comic scene. And I was part of this kind of indie self-publishing movement, and I could just tell he really dug it. He was really into mini comics, and of course the Comics Journal was published by Fantagraphics, which also published their own line of alternative comics. So we just clicked on a lot of levels, and yeah, I'm not so sure that the independent comics dug me that much all the time. It was a little pointy jabs sometimes, but never from Tom. Tom just saw everybody as a cartoonist, whether they were working at Marvel or DC, or whether they were stapling in the mini comics together. And we shared that in common. We were definitely brothers in that sense. And when it came time to really commit to ourselves and we've been thinking about this festival for a year. We're going to need somebody to run it. And I said, I suggested calling Tom. He lived in Silver City, New Mexico at the time. And I just said, what do you think about, coming out here and coming out here and running this thing? So he came out once, we talked about it. I can't remember at what point he and I started like Mutt and Jeff going around all the different institutions like the CCAD and stuff and pitching our idea. And I don't know why we thought that would be an easy thing to do. But in retrospect, it was actually much easier to do. And I give him some credit because he brings a lot of gravitas just from the Comics Reporter and the Comics Journal. And he knows what he's talking about. He knows his stuff. And I used to know my stuff. I mean, back when, I was going to the first versions of SPX or TCAF, I was kind of at the center of indie comics. I knew everybody who was doing comics. I knew everybody that was thinking about doing comics, and I knew what they were working on. But now, 25 years after that, it's been a long time. I'm not really as deeply in that group, but more importantly, and in a good thing, is that field has exploded. It's so much bigger. Back then, it was mostly guys. There were women for sure, and good ones, but it was mostly guys.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, now it's the age ranges are people get into the business in their 30s or they start in their 20s. It's totally normal for, young people of all genders to say, I'm going to be a comic book. I'm going to make comic books for a living. That did not exist when I was their age. And it's very exciting for me that that's that way. And Tom was still in touch with that group. He had a superpower where he, not just when he was in Columbus, but even when he lived in Seattle or lived in New Mexico, and then again when he lived in Columbus, he would go to everything. I don't know how he did it. He would go to every opening, every book signing. He was always there. He was always at mine. In San Diego, if I had a spotlight panel, no matter if it was 8 in the morning, there he came. There came Tom in the back, sat in the back for 30 years, 25 years or whatever. He was an amazing guy. And he was so focused on this needs to be open. It needs to be welcoming. And he made it. He wanted cartoonists to move to Columbus because he wanted this. He thought this town understood comics, embraced comics, and that he wanted this to be a comics town. And I'll be darned if cartoonists haven't moved here in the last 5 years. Definitely.
Yeah, right here. Yeah, I mean,
there you go.
Yeah. I mean, I only got to work with him for a little while, but it was very clear to me from the start. Last year I did some work with the kids track at CXC 2019, and he really deeply cared about the medium, and he really deeply cared that whether or not the artists knew that they were appreciated. That was just so it was parenthetically in every sentence that he said, and make sure that and every artist knows that you matter in this industry. And I thought that was that quality is infused into the DNA of CXC, and I feel like we owe a lot to Tom for so many things. But that's the thing that I could point to directly that I saw with my own eyes. So let's talk about some of the guests that have been at CXC over the years. Geez, Pete's, Jeff, you and Tom and Lucy Vijaya and all the different institutions have brought the freaking Justice League of cartoonists and authors and writers to the city.
Yeah. Hold on, I'm trying to. My dog is crying to be let out, and I'm just sending Vijay a text to see if she can let him out. Except I can hear her. I think she just beamed out. I don't know what happened there. Okay, so what do we got on the screen here? Oh yes, this was at CCAD, the very first Saturday night of the very first CXC. It's Art Spiegelman and Francois Mouly. And I was interviewing them on stage, and these are two people that I think are just two of the most amazing human beings I've ever met. They can talk about cartooning so intelligently, it's mind-boggling. And we all know Art very well. The creator of Mouse and co-creator of Raw. But Francois, I didn't really know her story until I got to know them more on a personal level. And she is the art director of the New Yorker. So she's the one who picks the covers every month. And she also was a huge driving force behind Raw, the Raw magazine. Raw, if you were a teenager or a college student in the 80s, Raw was a pivotal moment in the shift from comics just being Spider-Man or being underground to being art. And I can't go into the whole story here. We'll be here all day. But in a nutshell, she bought a printing press, a real printing press. And she and Art somehow got it up to their, I think, third floor flat. There's no elevator in New York. It was an abandoned building, and they got it up the stairs, and they hand printed, 4-color process, every issue of Raw, oversized, inspired by the Andy Warhol interview that was, that was hanging on the newsstands in New York City. And they got that, and she printed that thing. She had ink under her fingernails. It was an amazing story, and it was an amazing night. It was one of my favorites. This is yes, we had Gary Trudeau
and Glenn David Gold on stage at Mershon.
And Glenn David Gold is interviewing Gary Trudeau, and this is one of the big shows. This was like in Mershon. It was quite a packed theater, and Gary Trudeau, who was a hero of mine, and from high school through college, I carried around my Doonesbury books with me, even more than my Pogo books at that point, because I learned so much about cartooning and timing from Trudeau's comics. And he doesn't do interviews. He just doesn't do interviews. And he came, and I introduced him, but then I went out and I sat in the balcony and I watched this show, and he said everything I've been wanting to find out about what's his life been like and his decisions behind comics. That was a showstopper.
Oh, that's awesome. And then Chris Ware. Here's Chris Ware on stage with Caitlin McGurk.
Chris Ware, and on the screen behind him are a couple of his New Yorker covers. And I'll just try to tell a quick anecdote here. In the middle of this interview, and he's being interviewed in the red dress there by Caitlin McGurk, who is one of the professors at is she an assistant professor? I'm not sure that's important. She works at the Billy Ireland, and she's one of the main people part of their brain trust. And she is right in the middle of this great interview she's doing with Chris Ware. He stops her and says, I always wanted to tell you something. You wrote a paper one time talking about this idea that our memories are really still images, you think our memories are these little films, but they're really, if you look at them, they're really a series of still images, not unlike comics. And Chris said, I have always thought about that. And that was one of the driving forces. Correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't he say that was like one of the driving forces behind building stories or some of his theories? And two things happened. Obviously, Caitlin's face was like, what? She didn't even know he'd ever read this thing she had read. And the conversation at that point went from a really excellent interview with one of our foremost cartoonists to this other level, up out of frame, and it stayed there the entire rest of the time. It was a conversation about cartooning, the art, and the cartoonist, and that was I would say this was my number one event that we've had at CXC.
I was in the second row, and you felt a wave of something pass through the room when that exchange happened. And it wasn't until I reflected upon it a little bit that I was like, this is another thing that CXC cracked the code on, is it because of the nature of the different institutions and people who come together to make it, it very visually, appropriately, because it's a comics festival, a cartoon festival, it visually demonstrates this idea of how interdependent and interconnected all the pieces are. Educators, librarians, scholars, cartoonists, audience, we all need each other and we all affect one another. This isn't like, here's the star on the stage, bask in his stardom, right? Yeah. It points out and makes very explicit the cycle of how we're all, I mean, it sounds reductive to say it, but like we're all in this together, but like we are, like it all affects one another. And there isn't, the highest point is the point at which that you're standing on right now, right? And that was the moment where Caitlin suddenly was put in the spotlight to say, like, yeah, you had a direct effect on this person's work who, we thought we were here to celebrate him, but we're also celebrating you, and thereby celebrating all of us as part of this machine called comics and comics publishing. Keith Knight, another big personality who is, oh my gosh, just did another talk at the Billy Ireland on a Zoom webinar, and this guy's a force of nature.
He is, and he's a force of nature in person too. He really is. He's got it, and he's. I love his cartooning. I love his style. I love his editorial stuff. And sitting next to him is Chip Mosher of Comixology, who very much believes in independent comics.
And Jaime Hernandez there with Tom at one of the first CXCs.
Yeah, and Jaime's come back a number of times. I'm very grateful for that, because I think that the kind of cartooning that I consider myself a part of, and the kind that I read, started. I would say ground zero was Love and Rockets with him and his brothers, and he's amazing.
Yeah,
and that was a good talk too. Here we got Kyle Baker, one of my good friends at comics. We're pretty tight, and we're similar. I'll tell you a quick story about Kyle. Not really related to CXC, but there was a point where I was talking to DC Comics. They wanted me to do a comic for them, and the story they told me was they had an editorial meeting, and they threw out to the group, "Okay, this is just pie in the sky. Any cartoonist, any property, any character, who do you want?" And the two he said jumped out right away were Kyle Baker and Plastic Man, and me and Shazam.
Oh wow!
And of course Kyle drew about 13 comic books of Plastic Man before I even got mine started. So
Kyle is an amazing cartoonist. Yeah, I was there for this one too, and I was just again blown away that like CXC continues to bring in like these real masters of the medium. Wow, here's another one. This is from last year.
Yep, Mike Mignola. We're on Mershon. This is up on the big stage, and Mike's been in comics longer than I have, but we kind of peaked right in the early 90s and mid 90s all around at the same time. And this was a really fun interview because I love Hellboy and I love Mike, and I had a lot of questions for him because I read the whole Hellboy, the whole thing to get ready for this, and I had a lot of questions for him, and he had answers, and if he didn't have a good answer, he told the truth, and it was really funny. That was it. Hellboy is a landmark piece.
Yeah, and we'll talk more about this event in a minute, but this was like a big event that happened last year when Dave Pilkey came to Columbus and filled Mershon. Holy cow, right?
And it's an example of I've referred to myself a number of times in this as an indie artist or self-publisher or whatever, which is what I think of myself, but I forget there's this other thing I'm part of, and that's this the YA graphic novel boom.
The middle grade graphic novels, YA graphic novels.
And here Dave Pilkey is he's right at the top of that particular thing. But then again, that's an example of what we're trying to do at CXC is like we want to have Mike Mignola and Jaime Hernandez and Chris Ware and Dave Pilkey.
And Raina Telgemeier.
Okay, so now we're talking here. This is one of the other people right at the top of Scholastic and the YA movement. Raina Telgemeier. She is so good with kids, and this room was mostly, it looked to me like between 9 and like 13-year-old girls. And at one point, I was interviewing Raina, and I stopped and I asked the room. I said, "How many people in here want to be a cartoonist when they grow up?" Every one of the girls in that class shot their hands up.
Yeah.
I mean, Raina she's changing the landscape, and I think that's extremely healthy.
Yeah. Yeah. We owe a lot to her too.
Am I blabbing too much? Are you watching the time? I have no idea.
I'm watching the time. I'm going to start blasting through some of these guests, and so we can get to talking about programming and what's going to happen in 2020.
All right. Okay. I'll go faster too. Sergio Aragones, the Mad Magazine master, everybody's best friend in comics. He's one of my best friends. And one of my other best friends is Stan Sakai of Usagi Yojimbo.
Yeah, that was a great discussion that the three of you had up there. I was there for that too. And then P. Craig Russell, for crying out loud. P. Craig Russell.
Jaime
Hernandez there.
And he's a local boy.
What?
He's from Athens, but
Wow.
we consider that local.
And then here's another great panel.
You know what?
Jose Anderson. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Vijay
No.
cannot hear the dog, and he's crying. I'm just going to let him out. I'll just take a second.
Okay. Well, I'll keep going. All right. So then we had Jose Anderson and Nate Powell doing a panel together. You know, both doing really important works in comics about the civil rights movement, and then more people from the middle grade kidlit world, like Terry Liebenson of Just Jamie, Invisible Emmy, and over there is Patrick McDonnell in the background signing some copies of Mutts. Jay Stevens came last year to do the Wednesday night event at the Gateway. Jay Stevens, the creator of the Secret Saturdays, for crying out loud. And there he is with Raf Rosado, who has also done a lot for CXC over the years. And
Also does the graphic novels Giants Beware, Monsters Beware.
Yep. Yeah. And then we get editorial cartoonists like Matt Bors and Chelsea Saunders, who here were like right after winning some awards at CXC. And I wonder if we could talk just for a few seconds about CXC also has a number of awards that they hand out every year.
Yes. We have 3 main awards, one for a master, one for transformative work, and one for an emerging artist. Those are our 3 awards. And there's no particular number on like the master or the transformative. If we have 2 or 3 masters, we'll give 2 or 3 out. There's a group that gets together and just goes gaga over these guys. Matt Bors in this picture is holding his transformative work, of course, referring to I'm blanking. The Nib, thank you, duh.
We're talking about a lot of names today.
Yeah, we're talking really fast. And then the third award is the Emerging Artist Award, the Emerging Artist Award, and the qualifications for that are this: it has to be someone who's really working hard in the field of comics, committed to it, and is showing incredible growth and potential. And that comes with a cash prize of $7,500.
Yeah. And it's, I've been there for, like I said, every show, and it's always this electric moment in the expo when the award is announced, because like everybody stops what they're doing and there's no other programming happening when the Emerging Artist Award is announced. So like the whole show turns to this one person where everybody basically says like, we think what you're doing is great. Keep doing it. Here's more resources to help you keep doing it. And it's a very emotional moment in that room. It's really cool. So, and then Rob Armstrong was there last year too, another comic strip cartoonist of Jumpstart fame. So yeah, let's switch gears and talk about programming, because like there's so much stuff happening at CXC all over the city. And here's Brina Nunez doing a reading at SoulCon from last year, which happened at the same time as CXC. Not this year. SoulCon's happening at a different time. It's happening in September, and you can follow them on Facebook to find out more about that. But let's talk about so we have these big talks. Like this is the one that we were talking about earlier with Caitlin and Chris Ware. This was in, I think, the film auditorium at the Wex. Is that right?
Yes, film and audio auditorium. Yeah.
So it's like a medium-sized one, not quite as big as Mershon, but still you can fit a lot of people in there. And there's been some
over 100. It's usually packed. Yeah.
One year there was actually a it was Gertie the Dinosaur. What am I? See, I'm blanking on names.
Winsor McKay.
McKay.
John Canemaker was giving a talk.
That's right. And then he actually did the presentation of Gertie the Dinosaur live the way it was done when Winsor McKay did it, with like the stage interaction and everything.
Winsor McKay just briefly was the guy who did Little Nemo in Slumberland, but he also was one of the earliest character animation, one of the earliest animators. And he did a vaudeville show of Gertie the Dinosaur, and he would talk to the dinosaur. Most people watching this probably know that. But it was originally shown gigantic, so the dinosaur was huge on a screen up on a vaudeville stage, and he stood next to it and talked to the film. And at one point, actually walks over and steps behind the screen, but then a little animated version of him walks over to Gertie. Gertie picks him up and puts him on her head and carries him away.
Yeah,
and
that was
Canemaker, the famous animator and animation historian, reenacted it
in that room. That was really, really cool. here's you interviewing Raina. Again, there's like a picture of like the packed house that we had that day. I remember having to stand in the back because there was just like, even in the auditorium at the library, it's just like not enough to contain what, you know, the excitement about having Raina in the building. And then she did a presentation of how she made her book Sisters that year, drawing with the kids and for the kids. Let's talk about this giant pen, Jeff, because here's Carol Tyler.
This is legend. This is legend. Jim Woodring, who does the comic Jim, and has these really psychedelic, far out comics, but they're drawn impeccably. And he works with a dip pen. Well, he famously made a gigantic. He hand tooled a dip pen nib, and it works. It functions. And he brought it to CXC. And this is his indoor pen handle. It's his short red one. But I've seen pictures of him with a perfectly proportioned one. I'm sorry, my dog is outside causing trouble. And anyway, this is Carol Tyler, the amazing underground Carol Tyler artist, actually drawing with the pen. She dipped it in the little pot. I'm trying to point, like you can see me pointing into it, the little pot of ink in front of her, and she drew something. It was amazing.
Yeah, that was really cool. A whole bunch of people got to draw on this giant pad of paper with the giant pen. That was fun. And then, I mean, like, and it's okay. You go from that, and then you got Brian Michael Bendis in the room, you know, like Ultimate Spider-Man and, mainstream superhero comics, but also going back to his 90s work, you get to like Project Fire, aka Goldfish, and all these cool sort of noir thriller comics from Caliber in the 90s. But there he is on stage with Tom Spurgeon. So once again, this just incredible mix of not only representation from different fields of comic and cartoon art, but very, very different kinds of events, hands-on events, really interesting talks. And now we got to talk about the Pilkey event, Jeff, because here's the line around Mershon Auditorium.
This event blew everybody's mind. It blew ours. Even Pilkey was a little surprised, I think. But this was huge. This packed Mershon to the rafters. And this is the picture you're seeing on the screen, is the line of kids. They were all given a little Dogman, or I don't know, maybe it was Captain Underwear, little capes. So all the little red you see are capes. Is this a little film?
Yeah, here's a little video I shot.
So this line wraps around Mershon, the giant building of Mershon, and all these kids came in, and we went. I introduced Dave Pilkey, and even he said he gets a little nervous when he's in front of these big crowds. And I said, "Oh, it's no sweat." And then I walked out to introduce him, and I got to the podium, and the energy coming from thousands of kids was amazing. I introduced him, and at the end I said, "Are you ready to see Dave Pilkey?" And the sound that came at me, Jersey, I can't even tell you. It was like a physical wave.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it. It was so exciting. And then of course he went out there and he just drove the kids wild. So that's what I was looking at when the sound came barreling at me.
Oh man.
It was a blast.
And then they also, Scholastic sent Dogman himself to the festival, and this was a moment that captured a lot of people's imagination, was when he took the elevator down from the library.
Yeah, after Dogman had walked the little, we have an expo. The second floor of the downtown library we have the entire downtown second floor, and it's our expo. And so Dogman walked around that for a while, and then when he was leaving, he took the elevator. And suddenly we thought that was funny.
And then we talked a little bit about this. This was a great conversation that you had with Sergio and Stan. And I loved that it was a thoughtful exploration of their careers, their philosophies. But then you also, like you see behind Stan, you guys were drawing while you were talking too. So it's like...
Well, both of these guys can't stop drawing. If you go to dinner with them, they draw all over the table. And it's like those little Mad Magazine in the margins that Sergio does. He just draws those all over he never stops drawing. And the same is, go ahead.
Oh yeah, here's Lynn Johnston at the Wex, who was walking through her process and telling stories about her life while she's walking through her process. And Yeah, this was another really joyous and really funny presentation. So, and then Richie Pope, who is there for, this is another thing that happens during CXC. There is a residency that happens and an exhibition of art by the artists in residence of the Columbus Museum of Art. And here's Richie Pope on stage talking about his work in the residency that he did too. So again, like the Columbus Museum of Art is like that. It's near downtown. So it's kind of away from campus. So this was the thing that like when I'm going to go to some stuff on campus on the weekend, then I'm going to go down to the Columbus Museum of Art and check out an exhibition. Then I'm going to go over here to an after party. It's just like stuff is just happening all over the city. Seth coming to the show, and this is in the Schultz Auditorium at the Billy Ireland.
That was a great. He is such a good cartoonist, and yeah, he's a fascinating guy. You never know what he's going to wear either. He's definitely always comes in some kind of a vintage outfit.
Yeah, and then there's the Trudeau talk on stage to get a sense of like what it looked like at Mershon. And then the thing that's near and dear to my heart is that last year the kids track got amplified with more hands-on rich drawing experiences. And the thing that I always describe to people is it's happening in a public library where families are just going there on the weekend anyway. So maybe there are families showing up who don't know that CXC is happening. And what happened last year, I was in the room when this happened. Kids looked in, they're walking past the door where this exciting stuff is happening, where cartoonists are drawing with kids. And the kids peek their heads in and they very timidly ask, like, can we draw too? I'm like, yeah, get in here. You know, it's time to start drawing. And I was thinking about like, if I was 9 going to the library with my parents on a weekend thing, just to return some books. And then like Maurice Sendak is just there drawing and is like, yeah, come over here. Let's sit and draw together. Right. Like that's the thing that's happening at this event. Like, so I don't think it's hyperbolic to say like CXC and all the people who are involved with it are in the business of changing lives. And that's happening on that weekend at the library. It's incredible. I get goosebumps every time I think about it. And then this was this was from the drawing game show that happened at the end of the show last year. And what makes me excited about it was, I don't know if the audio's coming through, but
I don't think so.
Yeah, like, so we voted by cheering, and I was told that you could hear the cheering on the second floor of the library. And what I love about that was this idea of what's more transgressive to a 9-year-old than getting to scream in a library, right?
Yeah.
So like, but there's the Expo.
Ah, yes, this is the second floor of the Expo, and it overlooks the topiary garden.
And that's another thing I love about this show is the Expo is bathed in sunlight. You know, it's like, which sometimes can be kind of hot, but also it feels so fresh, and it doesn't feel, you know, like in some you know, you go to like a car show in Detroit or something. It's like, yeah, there's lots of cool lights and everything.
Well, and it's in a library too, which was an idea I stole from TCAF. TCAF, seriously, TCAF is a great show. It's also in more than one place, is in more than one building. You have to kind of walk around the city a little bit, passing little coffee shops and lunch places on the way. But the main expo is in the library. And our first year of CXC, we were in I can't remember the name of it, but it's a little like art building down near Bicentennial Park. That was an old foundry or something, but we outgrew that the minute we opened our doors. I mean, it just was too small, and I immediately thought of TCAF. And
the TCAF is a treasure in the comics industry. I mean, there's no other words for it. So yeah, we can only aspire to follow in their lead. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about what are we doing in 2020.
How much time do we have? What are we?
We got like 2 minutes and
2 minutes. All right. Take it, Jersey.
You guys got about 5. You got about 5 minutes, guys. So.
Okay.
Right, thank you.
Thanks, Bob. So, well, for one, all of our partner institutions are on board with what we're doing this year. You know, so like that has not changed. And I remember, you know, having lots of discussions about like the future of CXC over the last 6 months, and everybody is committed to continuing this really, really like valuable event for the community. And so they're all involved. And then in May, we made the announcement that we're switching to an online show for 2020, which what does that mean? Well, we had a lot of, and Jeff, you could speak to this too. It's like, we've had a lot of really hard discussions about like, okay, how do we preserve the character of this event? You know, we've explored it for the past hour now, like all the different kinds of like intimate events, big events, joyous events, celebrating all the different kinds of cartooning. So talk and teaches practical, useful programming for artists, following in like Tom Spurgeon's, vision for creating something that really not only celebrates cartoonists, but like makes something that elevates them and is something that's useful to developing cartoonists. That's in the mission statement, like Emerging Cartoonists Award, for crying out loud. So yeah, we're going to be doing all kinds of things, presentations like this. We're developing rich and practical and useful talk and teach events for the show.
I know that when we first started talking about going online for the show, it was early, and it was becoming more and more obvious that we weren't going to be able to have a physical show. But what made me more comfortable as we went along was everybody's getting more used to this process, the doing things online. I mean, maybe we might have to do it again or in part, but I don't think anybody thinks this is a forever thing. So I think we can. I think we'd maintain the spirit of it. I mean, I'm very impressed with Bob Corby for just jumping in and doing this, man.
Yeah.
It's I mean, we're actually watching you do this because it's a scary jump. What do you think, Bob?
Ask me anytime. I can go over all the things I've done wrong, so you don't have to do it. Offered my services to CXC, so
all right.
We appreciate that too.
Well, thank you for inviting us to do this too, because this has been very interesting. But we're going to do our best to with the different talents we have and the different personalities of this institutions to still bring a very similar kind of vibe to the show, at least in terms of the kind of interesting talks and educational and professional tips that I think we're going to be able to provide.
I got a slide up, and I don't want to confuse anybody. I just realized I probably should have put the dates of the show, which is October 1 through 4, 2020. But we're announcing some things about this year's show at the end of July. So at the end of this month, we're going to you follow us on social media. We got the links up there on the screen. We're going to be making some announcements about what's happening this fall. But the show itself,
we'll have our guest lists. I can't wait to show you guys our poster for this year. Can't wait.
Excited about that too. So I
might be doing some small things online here. So I'd love to have you back as guests if you want to, once you get the information out about CXC, we can.
Oh, sure. Are you continue to you can do like a podcast kind of thing? Or?
Yeah, podcasts. We've been did a few of them with the Space Prize Awards and getting better as I go.
Very cool.
So I have this system now, and we're going to try to use it for the next year or so, and hopefully lead up to a in-person show next year, and for CXC.
And I hope so too, and hopefully, and we'll be there if it's in person.
Yeah.
Great.
Well, thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Bob.
Thanks a lot.
Whoops. All right, guys.
Take it easy, Jeff. Thanks, Jersey.
I don't know how to stop this thing.
I can get rid of you. I mean,
get rid of me. Get rid of me. Get rid of me. Come on.
There you go. I appreciate you guys for watching. For coming by. We are about at the end of our first block for 4 hours. So we will be shutting this cast down and jumping over to the other 2 minutes. And coming up right at 3 o'clock-ish mark is notes from the next Comics Art Festival hosted by Dr. Teresa Rojas.